Someone named Setsuna Rikudu once said that law, morality, love, and justice are all just a farce created by humans. Because there was only one thing that ruled this world: violence. In a scene change, more precisely in a school, a teacher informs the students that the exam results will be published soon and then asks if they want her to announce their grades. Revealing that they are all terrible, she urges them to at least put in some effort next time. Additionally, she shares other news, informing everyone that Masamichi Akita took first place in all subjects once again, something they had already expected to happen. At that moment, some of the young man's classmates start congratulating him, but he replies that it was just pure luck. Even the teacher asks them to learn something from Akita so they can stop embarrassing themselves. His classmates continue congratulating him, which makes Akita throw off his glasses and think about thanking them for being complete idiots. He reflects that thanks to their inability to even write their names on the exams, he will be able to enter the University of Tokyo, work at a good company, and leave this wretched city. Since he concludes that in this world, smart people succeed, right at that moment, a girl arrives and hugs him from behind while asking if he can help her. She informs him that she won't have enough credits to pass. But before she can finish speaking, the young man replies that he will help her when he has it to land. At the same time, he curses her in his mind and wishes she would just disappear. But something he didn't notice was that another student was watching him. Later, that same student hits him and Akita asks why, calling him Ikushima and wondering what's wrong with him and why he's suddenly hitting people. Ikushima glares at him with rage and responds that he saw how Akita was looking at his girl. Akita reflects on what he is saying, recalling the moment when the girl had asked him for help. The young man who was hit, upon hearing that, looks at him and thinks that he is a complete idiot. He reflects that Ikushima is like a monkey in heat, paranoid that someone is going to steal his mate. Concluding that he is fighting against his own delusions, Akita decides that he has no reason to waste his time on fools like him. Akita replies that it's fine and that it won't happen again, apologizing before leaving. But Ikushima calls him back, only to hit him again and knock him to the ground. Once there, the bully asks if he thinks everyone is beneath him and then demands that he kneel. Akita does as he is told, while at the same time reflecting that he doesn't have to fight and realizes that this is because he is intelligent. He knows that his opponent practices karate and has competed in national tournaments, and if he dares to stand up to him, he will surely be beaten to a pulp. Besides, he knows that Ikushima won't have any real power once he steps into society, so he tells him to enjoy it while he can. Therefore, kneeling on the ground is the smartest move. Just then, someone asks if they are done. Revealing that a girl was watching them closely, Akita is the first to ask who she is, but the young girl doesn't answer and simply smiles. Then she asks Ikushima if he wouldn't rather fight her. This leaves the karateka confused. Well, not just him. Ikushima immediately leaves, warning Akita not to go near his girl. Akita, meanwhile, wonders if this girl came to help him. He thinks she must have, since just a few words were enough to make Ikushima leave. Concluding that this girl also made a smart move, Akita thanks her but then immediately asks who she is. However, the mysterious girl asks why he is running away. This catches Ikushima's attention, and she quickly follows up by saying that it's fine and that she completely understands, saying that karate fighters don't have the guts to fight for real. Ikushima, upon hearing that, asks what she just said, and the girl responds that karate is not a real martial art, especially traditional karate. She explains that they can't land full force blows on their opponents, only pretending to strike, but if any of those attacks make actual contact, they are disqualified. Concluding that such a farce can't be called a martial art, Ikushima, upon hearing that, curses at her and asks what she wants. The girl responds by asking if he still hasn't figured it out. She informs him that what she wants is a fight. This surprises everyone, and so Ikushima charges it at her, as traditional karate is characterized by incredibly fast attacks. With a single movement, he manages to close the distance in less than a second. The girl, on the other hand, doesn't seem to react at all, and without a doubt, that blow is going to hit her right in the face. Then, just before his strike connects, Ikushima stops, as it was supposed to be just a threat. He wanted to teach this girl a lesson for mocking his karate and his so-called fake attacks. She, meanwhile, smiles, and he realizes the mistake he has made, as that threat, the fist, he should have pulled back immediately, remains there, unmoving. Before he can react, the girl accepts his invitation to fight by striking Ikushima's arm. The young man screams in pain, and the girl comments that he's overreacting, saying she didn't even break a bone, then informing him that now she will get serious. Ikushima prepares a kick, but the girl begins to dodge every single one of his attacks. Akita, seeing this, reflects on how she dodged all his attacks and how Ikushima can't even touch her. This makes him wonder who this girl really is. She comments that he was supposed to be the second best in the country and wonders how he can say that. Then she says that he is pathetic. That enrages Ikushima, who laughs a little and mentions that now he will get serious, asking her not to say that he didn't warn her. That excites the girl, who asks if he is really going to get serious. It seems true, as Ikushima assumes a different stance, using a move that won him the national championship. Generally, karate strikes start from the legs, but this move follows a technique that deviates from the standard karate rules. The strike starts from the fist, and the feet follow through, skipping the usual preparation and allowing the hit to land before the opponent can react. People call that technique the lightning strike, but after hitting her, the girl counterattacks, leaving Akita astonished. She mentions that the last strike was incredible, confessing that she didn't see it coming. She says she wanted to dodge it, but in the end, she took the hit. Additionally, she reveals that the strike was very weak, and that if he only wanted to land a hit, he succeeded. But the strength of the attack leaves much to be desired. She concludes that if he wants to defeat someone, he has to aim to kill. There is no other option. Akita finds that incredible, even more so that a woman was able to defeat a man and that there is logic behind it. He considers that he can see a certain beauty in all of this. That's when he calls out to her and asks if she could teach him how to fight. That surprises the girl, and the young man thinks that not only fools fight, he believes that if she was able to fight, then even if he was bullied, he would no longer be afraid. On the other hand, if he became friends with that girl, Ikushima would never mess with him again. He concludes that this would be the smartest move. However, the girl suddenly embraces him, getting very close to him. This makes him ask her to wait, but before he can finish the sentence, she knees him in the stomach. The young man stumbles back, almost falling, and then notices that he is bleeding. He asks one approaching him. She replies that she will give him an example. She explains that if he were in the African savannah and saw a lion about to eat a zebra, would he go pet the lion's head and say, "Good boy"? Hearing that, Akita asks what she is talking about, and she responds by questioning whether he would pet the lion or not. The young man clearly answers no because the lion would eat him too. The girl is pleased with that response, as it is the correct one, and she is glad he understood of it, because that is exactly what is happening here. She moves even closer to him, only to deliver a kick to his legs. The girl asks why he thought she wouldn't hit him, when she clearly can and will subdue him with violence. She questions whether he thought the law would protect him, or perhaps morality, justice, or love. She informs him that all those ideas are a farce, and that right now, she can do whatever she wants to him. That is the only thing he can be certain of. She says that violence is the only thing that rules this world. Akita cannot understand that reasoning, but he admits that she is absolutely right, because this girl could eliminate him here and now, and that is the reality he is living at this moment, and therefore, the only thing he can do is surrender and beg for mercy like a little puppy. The girl looks at him, then smiles, pats his head, and tells him he is a good boy. She says she hopes he lives his whole life that way. Akita reflects that he had no logical reason, and maybe it was out of pure rage or helplessness, or perhaps just because she turned her back on him. But whatever the case, he felt an impulse and moved forward to hit her. But the girl turns around and calls him pathetic, only to land a punch on his face, knocking him unconscious on the ground. At that moment, he begins to dream, and in that dream, he was someone strong who exercised violence as he pleased. When he wakes up in his bed, he thinks that was the worst. At school, Ikushima's girlfriend asks why her boyfriend didn't come to class, saying that he won't tell her. Akita pretends not to know, but remembers the girl from yesterday. He decides to assume that everything that happened that day was just a dream, or rather, a nightmare. He believes that using violence as one pleases is quite stupid, and that's not his way, so he has to forget about it, since he doesn't think he'll ever see her again. But then he wonders if she is from another school and what she was doing there. Just then, the teacher asks the students to take their seats, as she has an important announcement to make. That's when the girl from yesterday appears, introduces herself as Setsuna Rikudu, and announces that she has just transferred. She tells everyone that she likes cooking, sewing, going to the theater, and, of course, violence. That leave all the students somewhat confused and surprised. At that moment, Rikudu spots the boy from yesterday, greets him, and the teacher asks if she knows Akita. The girl responds that she does, and upon learning his name, she approaches him and comments that they had a lot of fun yesterday. Then, she asks if he wants to do it again. Akita reflects that this is the story of an act of violence called Setsuna Rikudu. It's been a week since Setsuna Rikudu transferred to her new school. In a short time, she has made friends with everyone and always receives enthusiastic greetings in the mornings. Her classmates ask if she has gotten used to the school and also reinforce how cute she is. Akita observes the situation and thinks it's good that she gets along with the rest of the class. However, he cannot forget the first time he saw her. He clearly remembers how she appeared out of nowhere and beat up Ikushima, an experienced karateka. As if that wasn't enough, she also hit him, breaking his nose and knocking out a tooth. Additionally, she fractured the ulna of his left arm, not to mention the rest of the injuries that will take time to heal. Even now, after a week, he confesses that he still feels pain all over his body. He wonders how he could forget what happened if the pain has only increased with each passing day. Just at that moment, she looks at him, causing a slight chill. However, she only approaches to greet him. Akita, with a mix of nervousness and resignation, returns the greeting, though he can't help but think that she's playing dumb after hitting him. Setsuna asks how his injuries are. He responds, somewhat annoyed, that they wouldn't be there if it weren't for her. His tone is louder than expected, drawing the attention of several classmates. Immediately, Ikushima's girlfriend approaches and asks why he shouted. Akita, trying to play it off, replies that it's nothing. Internally, he scolds himself for raising his voice. He can't believe he lost control like that, as he has always considered himself an intelligent and calm guy. Ikushima's girlfriend mentions that her boyfriend still hasn't returned to class and wonders what might have happened to him. For her part, Rikudu indifferently comments that the name doesn't ring a bell. Akita, upon hearing her, can hardly believe it. He clearly remembers that she almost beat him to death. He also reflects on the fact that neither he nor Ikushima have told anyone what happened that day. He doesn't want to be associated with her in any way, and is sure that Ikushima feels the same. Akina believes that as long as he stays away from her, he can keep it that way until they graduate. However, at the end of the class, he notices something unexpected. Rikudu is on the same train as him. This makes him wonder if they take the same train line every day to go to school. He also starts questioning where she lives, what kind of life she leads, and who her parents are. The train arrives at Shinjuku Station, and upon seeing her get off, he feels immediate relief. But then, something strange happens. Without realizing it, he starts following her. He questions why he is doing it, but admits to himself that curiosity has won. He wants to know more about Setsuna Rikudu's life. As he walks through the district, he observes his surroundings and doubts that she lives anywhere in that commercial area. He wonders again what a high school student is doing in a place like this, just as he accidentally bumps into someone. The woman he bumped into immediately reacts, yelling at him to watch where he's walking. Annoyed, she points to her clothes and scolds him for spilling liquid on her skirt. One of the men accompanying her steps forward and asks what happened. Without hesitation, she demands that the student take responsibility, asking if he knows how much her skirt costs. She adds that now he will have to buy her a new one. Akina, nervous, apologizes and admits that he wasn't paying attention. The man accompanying the woman asks to wait a moment, as if assessing the situation. Then, with a calculating smile, he comments that perhaps there is a way to settle this. Without giving him time to react, they lead him into an alley. There, they begin to take all the money he had on him. Once they are done, they throw his wallet to the ground and tell him that, with this, the problem is solved. The woman thanks Zin, and the man, with an indifferent expression, mentions that if he hadn't had money, they probably would have eliminated him. Akina bitterly reflects on what just happened. The woman and her group of losers took 30,000 from him just because he was too stupid not to watch where he was going. He complains in his mind, convinced that they are all idiots. Even if they were together, none of them could match his grades. But in the end, he knows he can't fight. There's no way he could win against them. He also can't call the police. He concludes that violence is the language of the incapable, those who cannot communicate through reason. That's why, if he fights, he will inevitably lose. As they say their goodbyes and walk away with his money, Setsuna Rikudu suddenly appears in front of everyone. Akina, surprised, shouts her name and wonders if she has come to help him. She starts running toward the group. The young man assumes she is about to fight. He thinks that even though she is alone against 3 men, he wonders if she can defeat them. But instead of attacking the criminals, Setsuna jumps and lands a knee strike directly on his face. Akina, dazed, feels a new pain spread across his face. He staggers, and as soon as he regains his balance, asks her what the hell she thinks she's doing. She, completely calm, mentions that she thought she had enough strength to knock him out in one blow. Still confused, he demands an explanation. She simply looks at him with a piercing gaze and responds that he surprises her. Akina falls silent, thinking that none of this makes sense. He doesn't understand anything that is happening. But before he can process it, she grabs his wrist and asks him to go home. However, before they can leave, the man from before calls out to her. Without warning, he grabs her by the clothes, stopping her in her tracks. With a mocking smile, he asks who she thinks she is and if the two of them are a couple. He says he doesn't understand why she kicked him in the face, but now they won't be able to leave as if nothing happened. He adds that she will have to pay for her disrespect. Then he looks at her more closely. For a moment, his expression changes. Impressed by what he sees, he murmurs that she is really pretty. Without wasting time, he asks if she has some money problems. He offers her a job, assuring her that this way she can pay off her so-called boyfriend's debt. But Setsuna doesn't respond, so the man frowns, not understanding her silence, and orders her to look up. At that moment, the girl asks if he refrains from violence, leaving him confused by her words. However, the man has no time to respond or react as Rikudu attacks immediately. His nose breaks from the impact, and he starts bleeding. Rikudu comments that there is nothing worse than getting distracted, staring at your opponent's eye in the middle of a fight. She adds that he had the opportunity to attack him when he caught her off guard, but instead, he stood completely still. By not reacting, he lowered his own guard. For her, that was a clear declaration that he was refraining far from violence. That's why she hit him. His friends, seeing what happened, react furiously and launch their attack, but it's all useless. Rikudu takes them down one by one, dodging and counterattacking with ease. Within seconds, they are all on the ground, injured and unable to continue fighting. The woman accompanying them watches the scene in horror. Her face fills with panic as she begins to scream, pleading for Rikudu not to come closer. She steps back more and more, trying to get away as best as she can. Finally, with a trembling voice, she asks if he is going to hit her too, insisting that she is just a girl. But Rikudu is one too. Without hesitation, he delivers a blow that leaves her stunned. Then, coldly, he comments that violence does not distinguish between genders. Akina, watching everything, cannot believe what he has just witnessed. She alone has left 4 people on the ground without any effort. She is much stronger than he ever imagined. But the scariest thing of all is that she completely ignores social norms. If she wants to fight, she fights. She does not care about any rule or law of society. In other words, Setsuna Rikudu is antisocial. At that very moment, she looks at him directly. Akina instinctively raises his guard. She, with curiosity, asks what is wrong and why he is in a defensive stance. He, with evident nervousness, responds that he wants to know if she also plans to hit him. Rikudu smiles and looks at him with amusement. She questions what he is saying and why she would hit him. Akina, unable to hold back, reminds her that just moments ago, she kneed him in the face. She responds with complete naturalness. She did it because now they are besties. At another moment, those who had been beaten met with someone else. A man who, half incredulous and half curious, asked how it was possible that a schoolgirl had beaten them up. He wanted to know if it hadn't been the other way around, but one of them denied it, explaining that maybe the girl was a martial artist or something like that because she hit really hard. Intrigued, the man asked one of them what had happened to his face. He replied that she had broken his nose. Upon hearing that, he thought it was all madness, but then a girl started coughing. She had been busy with something else until then. The man turned to her and said that what she had done was the worst thing anyone had ever done to him. She apologized, calling him Shuji. But in response, he hit her and threw her away. Then he looked at the 3 beaten men and asked why they hadn't captured her. One of them hesitated, asking if he meant the girl. The man confirmed and added that their business relied on the respect they commanded. If they lost that respect, they lost the money. That's why they had to make it clear who was in charge. He also questioned how hard it could be to catch a schoolgirl. He said they could take advantage of her, record material, and sell it, which would bring them more clients and more money. Then one of the group looked uncomfortable with that. He said it was a crime and that they would be caught. But Shuji mocked him, saying that today's youth had balls just for decoration. As he approached the girl from before, he grabbed her by the hair and said they had to lift weights. And once they did, they'd understand perfectly. That feeling of being unstoppable, that euphoria of being the strongest. And it was even better when it came to a woman. No matter how much she scratched and screamed, sooner or later you could overpower her. He added that when you're strong, there's no woman who can resist you. And he asked what they thought and if they wanted to train. Back at school, Setsuna runs into Akita and asks if he wants to have lunch with her. He refuses, telling her she should have lunch with her grandmother instead. But she asks him not to say things like that and shows him she brought food for him too. She shows him she made lots of high-protein food. Seeing that, the boy comments he didn't know she was a bodybuilder, but she replies that protein will help his wounds heal faster. However, he wonders silently if she means the wounds she caused herself. Just then, she tells him they should start eating. She's as cheerful as always. That's when Akita wants to ask her something, if bringing him food and eating together meant they were friends now. She replies with a smile. But he remembers that she attacked him twice for no reason, and now she's treating him like lifelong friends. So he asks an important question, why him? He adds that if she's looking for someone strong, there are plenty of people out there, like Ikushima, for example. But she laughs and says she doesn't choose her friends based on whether they're strong or weak. That leaves Akita confused, and he asks again, then for what reason him? That's when she confesses it's because he and she are the same. After saying that, silence takes over, until Akita, raising his voice a little, asks how he's anything like her, calling her crazy. That makes her laugh. Just then, Ikushima's girl appears, asking what's going on and why the lovebirds are fighting. Hearing that, Akita rushes to clarify they're not a couple, then asks where she came from. Then Setsuna says that deep down, he already knows that it's not about showing strength or winning or losing. It's something beyond the result, and actually, it's pretty simple. It's about doing it when passion demands it. Akita thinks it's about time she drops the double meanings. Meanwhile, the girl from before suggests they just go to a motel already. Meanwhile, inside a van, several men were waiting. One of them asked if they were really going to do it, adding that a girl's disappearance wouldn't go unnoticed. The one, smoking, replied that if his conscience was eating at him, he could leave. But he should know that Shuji would take care of silencing him. Then he explained that Shuji's specialty was seduction. As a host, he made women fall for him and pay for his drinks. Those without money were forced to work as escorts. But if one of them managed to escape his grasp, the business would collapse. That's why he wondered how Shuji made sure no one escaped. One of his companions, listening to the conversation, commented that maybe he treated them like queens, but the other laughed and said he was naive. He explained that in reality, he used violence. He beat them until his knuckles were sore and drilled it into their heads that if they tried to escape, he would eliminate them. That way, they lost all hope. He added that according to rumors, there were women he had beaten to death. That's why they obeyed him without hesitation. At that moment, the driver asked for silence and told them to look because their target was there. The one with the broken nose said they'd follow her until the perfect moment to catch her. That it didn't matter if 1 or 2 witnesses saw them. They had to get her into the van in a single move. Then they started following her. When they saw the chance, they captured her, throwing her into the van, and immediately sped off. However, back at Shoji's place, he received a call and asked if they had already captured the girl. But they replied no, which made him ask in frustration what they were waiting for and not to bother him with nonsense. Then a voice asked him to wait. It was the girl who introduced herself as Setsuna Rikudu and said it was a pleasure to speak with him. At the same time, one of his men could be heard yelling at her to give the phone back. She responded by punching him in the face and asked why they wanted to kidnap her. Hearing her, Shuji said she must be the girl everyone was talking about and asked if it was her who had taken down his men. Setsuna answered yes. Shuji, furious, shouted asking who the hell she was and swore he would eliminate her, that if she thought she could mock him and get away with it, she was dead wrong. He said he'd find out where she lived and burn her house to ashes. The threats didn't stop, but Setsuna, a bit confused, replied that she didn't understand what he meant and asked if he also wanted to fight her. That made him even angrier. She added that she didn't even know who he was. Then Shuji told her to listen carefully. Nothing irritated him more than a girl like her, and he swore he'd make her pay. He hung up the call furiously and immediately commented that she was a very interesting girl. Then he asked his friend Masamichi Akita if she was always like that. Akita, for his part, said no, but then corrected himself, saying yes, that she was exactly like that. Akita is sitting in front of a man. He thinks this is the worst. Then he remembers that after school, he was forced into a car and taken to this place. In front of the man, somewhat nervously, he thinks it's obvious this man doesn't have a proper job and uneasily wonders if the man is some sort of semi-gangster. Akita nervously asks what's going to happen to him. The man thinks for a moment, then replies that first they need to cover medical fees, doctor's fees, and compensation. He proposes a figure. How about 3 million yen? The young man reacts in shock at hearing 3 million. Shuji takes a moment to think and then says, that's fine. He says that if Akita introduces him to some girls from his school, that would cover the expenses too. Finally, he adds that they should now focus on this situation. Akita reacts confusedly, asking what's going on. The man raises his fist and says he's just going to return the favor for what his girlfriend did. While observing the huge arm raised, the boy thinks he's going to get hit, that he's going to die. The man prepares himself and says, here we go. The boy desperately screams, saying he's got it all wrong. He insists that everything is completely wrong, completely. He explains that Rinkudo Setsuna isn't his friend, nor his girlfriend. He recalls that in fact she hit him the first time they met, and afterward, he continued receiving all kinds of senseless violence. He thinks he was eventually dragged into this whole mess. The man listens silently, then places his hand on the boy's shoulder, who reacts startled. Shuji smiles with relief, saying so that's how it is. He should have said so earlier. Then he asks if they are both victims of Setsuna Rikudo, and laughing slightly, apologizes for having scared him. The boy, still sweating, wonders if he's safe now. His expression shows confusion and bewilderment. The other remains silent for a moment. Then he asks if Akita is a virgin. The boy, nervously, tries to deny it, but after an awkward silence, he finally admits, yes, he is a virgin. Shuji excitedly responds saying he knew it. The boy apologizes, but the man responds, that's not right, that being a virgin at his age is unacceptable. He adds that to make things worse, Akita doesn't have muscles, which is why women look down on him. Finally, he comments that maybe this is fate, grabbing a girl who was there. The man says if Akita doesn't want women looking down on him, the answer is to have more muscles. The girl next to him begins to have her breasts explored, while Shoji continues saying women are weak and can't resist the muscles. Shuji thinks for a moment, then addresses the boy, telling Akita-kun he should go to the gym. He immediately tears the shirt off the girl who was there, stating it's fine to touch them. Akita reacts, alarmed and blushes. The man, along with the girl, tells him not to hold back, that it's a free service, adding he should never let a woman look down on him again. The girl timidly says she won't ever do such a thing. The boy responds uncomfortably that it's not about money. The man whispers to the girl to get Akita in the mood. She agrees, saying all right, and approaches the boy, playfully apologizing. Nervously, he tries to stop her, saying, wait, stop. Alarmed, the boy wonders if this is really okay and if he won't be charged for this later. He reflects that refusing too strongly and making them angry would be terrifying. Finally, he decides he has no choice but to sacrifice his virginity. As he looks at the girl before him, he's surprised to realize she's covered in bruises. The man, placing his hand on the girl's head, tells Akita not to hold back, that she's already been with dozens of others to pay off her debt. He continues by saying she's nothing more than a toy. The girl remains silent with her head lowered. Akita also stays quiet, seriously observing her. Then, she slowly moves her hand forward. Akita stops the girl, telling her she doesn't have to do this. She reacts surprised, and the man confusedly asks what's wrong, wondering if Akita is hiding it to his embarrassment. The young man firmly replies that he doesn't want this. He adds, it's not like he's supporting feminism or something, nor is he against prostitution, but forcing someone into having sex is the lowest thing you can do. Shoji reacts with surprise. Then he questions if Akita is so sure to speak so grandly, saying that if he were that girl, perhaps he would fall in love. But then he looks down and notices that Akita's titan has awakened. The man starts mockingly laughing at the boy, asking if he's preaching with his titan awakened and comparing him to one of those disgusting brothel clients. Shuji imitates him, nervously stating he has no intention of doing anything even if he has an erection. But then the man continues laughing loudly. The girl can't hold back any longer and starts laughing as well, covering her mouth. Shuji begins bursting into uncontrollable laughter. The man keeps laughing, saying his stomach hurts from so much laughter. The boy thinks violence is a crime and should never be committed. He mentally recalls Article 208 of the Criminal Code about the crime of assault, stating anyone who commits an act of violence shall be punished by imprisonment for up to 2 years, a fine of up to 30,000 yen, detention, or a minor fine. He thinks to himself that violence is a crime and should never be committed. But in an outburst of fury, he punches Shoji. Akita, in a memory, holds his head in anguish. He reflects on frustrating memories tormenting him after so many years, wondering if he's never had a situation like this before. He recalls a time when his dignity as a person was threatened, and his face was overwhelmed by injustice. He acknowledges that, although extremely rare, there are moments when one has to attack. That's why he dares to shout it. Long live violence. Akita throws a punch straight at the thug's face. In his mind, he admits it's the first time he's hit someone. He also felt like all the crap he had to endure was released at once. And in that very moment, his brain was flooded with noradrenaline and dopamine. He figures that's why he didn't feel any pain at all. It is revealed that his opponent was on top of him and had hit him more than once. After that, Shuji exclaims that he must be crazy, since despite seeing how strong he was, he still decided to punch him. He adds that he hoped he doesn't get bruised, but then pauses for a few seconds and admits he's still pissed. He decides to break a couple of bones to relieve that stress. But just at that moment, Setsuna Rikudu arrives. She looks at her guy, and the thug realizes she was there. He says she's finally here and apologizes for messing up her boyfriend's face. The girl remains silent, which annoys the thug a bit. He asks her what's wrong, if Cat got her tongue, and if she's terrified seeing her boyfriend all beaten up. He also warns that he doesn't make empty threats and won't let them go like nothing happened. He says he's going to hurt and eliminate her, so he demands she kneel and start begging for her life. If she obeys, he might let them go, but not without punishment. However, the girl smiles and asks if he's one of those dogs that bark but don't bite. That enrages the guy even more, and so the fight began. The concepts of threat and reconciliation vanished from his mind, and his thoughts turned to one single solution: fight without mercy. He watches her cautiously, remembering she single-handedly took down all his men. Some said she used some kind of martial art. She might be a girl, but he can't let his guard down. He reluctantly admits to himself that he has to be careful. Shuji hesitated for a moment and raised his fists. Meanwhile, Setsuna launched her attack. Every strike was calculated and precise. After multiple hits, she grabbed her opponent's head and slammed his face into her knee. It was a perfect combo, executed as naturally as breathing. However, Rikudu didn't expect one thing: that this whole fight was going exactly as Shuji had planned. He had no clue about martial arts, but due to the nature of his job, he had gained vast experience in hand-to-hand combat, which had led him to victory more than once. In other words, he knows exactly where to take hits to avoid compromising vital points. And then, with the enormous strength he has, he throws Rikudu into the air like a rag doll. After that, he comments that it was just as he thought. She went straight for his vital points, and that it wasn't a bad strategy. But he warns her she can't expect to win a fight with such a simple mindset. That's why he's going to show her what brute strength is, and that it's the only thing that matters in a fight. He orders her to stand up and asks if she really thinks he's just going to take a couple of punches and be done. Right after saying that, he curses her while preparing a new attack. But Rikudu quickly moves and traps him with her legs. Shuji is confused and sarcastically comments that if all she wanted was to do naughty stuff, she could have just asked. But that wasn't it. What she was doing was a judo technique called cross guard. This technique consists of controlling the opponent with the legs, making it hard for them to strike. That way, she has the chance to execute another technique, el kusakuri, a maneuver in which, after taking the opponent down, she can mount him and completely subdue him. After performing the technique, she asks if she hadn't already told him that brute strength isn't all that matters. She chuckles lightly, calls him an idiot, and declared that now she'll be the one to teach him what really matters, violence. And so she starts beating him. The technique emphasizes that there's no simpler or more effective position, highlighting the brilliance of mixed martial arts. Rikudo, smiling, raises her fist as it's explained that this position allows immobilizing the opponent using only the lower body. Meanwhile, she can strike with full force, and that's exactly what the girl does. Shuji feels the pain, but still fights back. However, Rikudo laughs and says it just tickles, revealing that even if the one underneath manages to counterattack, the effect would be minimal. The attack continues, though her opponent struggles to break free from the mount. Rikudo keeps her balance, shifting her weight forward and backward with precision as she keeps hitting him. Of course, there are ways to escape the mount position, but they only work if executed properly by the one who's mastered them. Because if the person trying to escape has no practice or even basic knowledge, what can they do while their face is getting pummeled the moment they fail to break free? Thus, the mount position is a prison of fists with no way out. Shuji reflects. She's destroying him. He has to get out. He must use all his strength to do it. He believes he still has energy left, and if he uses it, he can do anything. He remembers how girls used to mock him. That frustration led him to the gym. As he grew stronger, he became more popular. Strength saved him. And that's all he has. He throws a punch at Rikudo, but she swiftly uses her forehead, causing his fist to hurt upon impact. Then she asks him if he really thought only the strongest wins a fight. She admits she understands that view, that it's a simple and clear way of seeing the world. However, violence is something deeper and far more interesting. With that said, she drives her elbow straight into Shuji's face. After all that, Akita asks what happened to the girl who was there, and Rikudo replies that it seems she ran away. Immediately after, the boy sees Shuji's face and wonders if he's still alive. His companion says he seems pretty used to getting hit, so he'll be fine, probably. Then she asks Akita if he feels okay and if he wants to go to the hospital. The boy looks up, surveys the whole place, and after a moment of silence, declares that it's all her fault. That leaves her a bit confused. Then he explains that everything happened because she fought that guy earlier, and after that, he got kidnapped and beaten up. He reaffirms, staring at Setsuna Rikudo, that it's all her fault. He also admits he's genuinely angry, so much that he starts trembling. He thought his life would be a smooth journey to success. He believed he was meant to live in peace and never imagined going through such hell. But even so, there's something interesting. He confesses it felt amazing to hit someone who made him mad. That's why he asks her if she can teach him how to fight. Rikudo asks why, and Akita replies it's obvious. That way, he'll be able to hit her someday. She hugs him, smiles, and tells her dear Akita that yes, she'll teach him, and welcomes him to the world of violence. After that day, two young men talk about a rumor related to a tsujigiri, something samurai used to do to test the sharpness of their sword. One of them, upon hearing that, asks if his friend knows what year they're in, to which the other responds that he's serious. He adds that apparently there's a guy going around picking random fights for no reason. The other one doubts it, asking if he's really doing that. But either way, he says he doesn't care. If that idiot comes near him, he'll knock him out. His friend asks if he's been going to the gym because he looks bigger. Then someone else interrupts, asking if they don't think the night is beautiful. It is immediately revealed to be Akita, who looks at them and asks if they want to fight him.
At another moment, Akita explains that his shoulder bumped into another man's. Neither of them made an effort to dodge, so the incident was mutual. Still, that man yelled at him as if it had all been his fault. Akita noticed that the other man had no intention of apologizing, which made him even angrier, and it was clear the situation could escalate into a fight. Back at school, a week had already passed since he was caught by that man, and he had finally returned to his peaceful days. However, he reflects that this isn't entirely true since Rikudo sits near him. Just at that moment, she greets Ikushima good morning. He doesn't respond, and Akita thinks he understands that feeling well. On the other hand, the girl complains that the boy didn't return her greeting, which Akita believes is because she hit him. That's when Ikushima's girlfriend appears, apologizing to Rikudu on his behalf, explaining that Ikushima is a very shy person. Something the girl finds cute, she asks Akita if he agrees, but he responds by asking what she's referring to. Akita remembers when Ikushima said the two of them would pay for what they did to him. Ikushima's girlfriend asks him not to be angry at everyone, saying that's not good. However, Rikudu states she has no problem with that. Akita thinks that because of her, he has received a lot of unnecessary hatred. He wants to hit her, but knows that as long as he can't, nothing will change. After class, Rikudu meets up with Akita and asks if he still wants her to teach him how to fight. He says yes, and that it's so he can hit her. The girl laughs and says that's amazing. She cheers up and wonders where they should start, believing they'd begin calmly. So she suggests he first pick a random fight with someone out there. That confuses him, and he quickly asks why. She replies that if he wants to learn how to fight, the first step is to find a fight, as it'll also help him understand his own skills. However, the boy replies that he already knows his abilities. He's an ordinary person with no fighting experience. He adds that if he tries to pick a fight, he'll get beaten up without being able to counter. Seeing him like that, Rikudu says he's an idiot. He asks why, and she questions why he wants to learn to fight if he's afraid to fight. Which is true, and he replies that he just doesn't know how to fight. Hearing that, she says that indeed, he just needs to learn something. But as if she were a teacher, she declares she won't abandon her dear student and will teach him a technique. She assures him that with that move, he can win most fights without any trouble. The boy, hearing that, asks if it's some kind of commercial. Without giving him a chance to reply, the girl announces that she'll teach him the technique by applying it directly on him. Back to his first fight, Akita took a defensive stance, which made the man in front of him simply laugh. To that man, weak boys should be obedient, and showing any sign of resistance was considered a crime. Therefore, for him, that was reason enough to beat someone up one-sidedly. With that logic, he had spread violence more times than he could count, among friends, at home, or at work. In his world, even those who acted arrogantly ended up standing still after taking a few hits. But this time, things were different. Rikudu had taught him that the most important thing was landing the first hit and ending everything with that single move. She explained to Akita that if he managed to land it properly, his opponent wouldn't be able to fight back, making the first strike crucial. The boy understood that logic, but replied that things didn't always work out as conveniently as she said. The girl replied that it would be possible as long as he mastered the technique. At that moment, the man told the boy to come at him and asked if he was scared. He warned that if so, he would crush him. However, Akita remembered that the technique originated in Muay Thai. It's a highly effective move capable of causing severe damage and has become a standard in modern mixed martial arts. It consists of taking advantage of a long distance where no counterattack can reach, and with a sudden leap forward, swinging the leg as if kicking a soccer ball using full force. Thus, Akita kicks his opponent directly in the calf. The calf kick targets the tibialis anterior muscle, one of the weakest spots. One of the hardest parts of the leg, like the ankle, is used. In short, the strike causes intense pain, something his opponent clearly feels, saying it hurts a lot. Akita reflects that he managed to land the hit and remembers Rikudu explaining how to use the technique. However, his opponent doesn't fall and asks what his problem is. That makes Akita question himself. He already used what he learned, but now doesn't know what to do next. He knows his opponent is still full of energy and that he only kicked his leg. In the end, he knows no other move, so he freezes, unsure how to proceed. The man gets ready and yells that he'll smash his face, and the boy barely manages to cover himself, knowing he's about to take a hit. But then, the attack goes straight into the ground. This happens because the low kick, aside from causing pain, has another consequence. It destabilizes the leg. When hit, the opponent loses the ability to stay standing, making it nearly impossible to keep balance. Akita just watches what happens, which frightens his opponent, who begs him to wait. But the boy ignores the plea and quickly lands another low kick. That causes even more pain in the man who can't stay on his feet. Before receiving another strike, he gives up, shouting that he surrenders and asking him to stop. Hearing this, Akita wonders if he has really won. And it was at that moment that he realized something important. The belief that violence is inherent and should always be avoided no matter who gets hit. But setting aside good or evil, the feeling that remains in the heart of the victor is something incredible. Back at school, Rikudu congratulates Akita on his first fight. She says she didn't expect him to have so much potential and praises him again, which leads the boy to ask if that was a compliment. She replies that actually, she thought he'd lose his first 3 fights. However, she acknowledges that Akita understood the technique she taught him quite well, so she asks him to try it on her. At first, the boy is confused, but she assures him it's fine and that he can attack her with full force. Akita asks if she really wants him to kick her with everything he has, and she confirms it. Without wasting time, the boy throws his kick. But before it can land, she makes a move. They lock eyes, and immediately Akita feels intense pain, while Rikudu laughs playfully. The boy asks if he did something wrong and why only he feels pain. She replies that it wasn't a mistake, his low kick was perfect, but what she did was a check. She explains that a low kick always targets the tibialis anterior, and if she positions her leg correctly and aligns it with the kick, the one who gets hurt is the attacker, causing pain and injury. She asks if he learned something useful. Akita complains that she should have warned him beforehand, but Rikudu insists that the best way to learn is through the body. She adds that since he's going to pick fights, it's important to understand that some people will use checks to defend against low kicks. Akita, however, doubts there are many people out there capable of using such advanced techniques, and comments that if someone like that existed, it'd probably be her fighting them. She reflects for a moment and admits he has a good point. Meanwhile, at a press conference, a reporter asks the new champion how he feels after winning the title he so longed for. The man responds that he's simply speechless and feels like he proved he's the strongest Japanese fighter. The journalist asks if that statement isn't a bit arrogant, considering he hasn't defended his title even once. He also mentions whether he's forgotten about Mr. Perfect, Kamiza, a fighter who defended his title more than 10 times and remains undefeated with 50 fights. The champion hears this and asks if Kamiza isn't the heavyweight champion, to which the reporter nods, reminding him that Kamiza is a national treasure. Then, the fighter smiles and says he respects Kamiza as a sports athlete, leaving the reporter confused. But right after, the champion stands and declares that if martial arts are about who's the strongest, then body weight and gender restrictions only make it a sport. He claims that a male heavyweight division doesn't represent the true essence of martial arts. And finally, he reveals his desire to be the strongest in the world. The man introduces himself to everyone as the heavyweight champion, Fuwa Subaru. At another time, a heavyweight title match is about to begin. Both fighters begin their attacks, but it's noted that Fuwa is only in his 3rd professional fight. He skillfully dodges fierce strikes. He immediately counters the champion, who starts to stagger, until he takes a hit that knocks him out. Falling to the ground, it's clear he won't get up. So they announce the new heavyweight champion is Fuwa Subaru, the strongest man in all of Japan. This leaves Akita astonished. He reflects that Fuwa is still amazing, even considering he only recently started in MMA. He also says that if he had to fight him, he probably wouldn't make it out alive. It's revealed that a few days have passed since he won his first fight, and now that the excitement has faded, all that remains is worry. He doesn't know if he'll win the next one. If his opponent knows MMA, they could counterattack. He knows that if he gets caught, he won't be able to fight properly. He realizes he can't rely solely on the low kick. It's crucial to have solid defense and well-planned counters. So he asks Wedge Rikudu to teach him a new technique. But she quickly rejects his request. He asks why, and she responds that even if he only knows the low kick, getting distracted with other techniques isn't a wise choice. She also emphasizes that he already masters a very useful move. However, watching her, he replies that he has no idea what she means. She then questions why he wants to learn something new. The boy answers that she was the one who said he had to face her, and that the low kick wasn't enough. When it's blocked, he feels useless. And if he at least knew more moves, he would feel more confident. But then Rikudu calls him and tells him that there is no such thing as feeling comfortable in violence. That there are no aggressors or victims because everyone is subject to violence. Only the outcome matters. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. That is violence. The boy is speechless and she asks if he understood. He replies yes, bowing. But then he walks away and tells her he'll look for another teacher. Something that leaves Rikudu a bit disappointed. That's how Mr. Akita arrives at the War vs. Wild Martial Arts Academy. He wonders if he's in the right place. He confesses to himself that he's nervous and a little scared. Even so, he enters, says his name, and reports that he has a reservation. The person attending him greets him kindly and says they were expecting him, then asks if he booked a personal training session. The boy is speechless for a moment, but when he regains his senses, he asks if the person attending him is the champion. Fuwa Subaru, the man confirms it. Akita is even more impressed and asks if he really teaches common people like him. The fighter replies yes. The boy, surprised, can't help asking if he shouldn't be training or doing something like that. Subaru says he also trains, but admits that doesn't pay the bills. That's why he decided to start personal training sessions. They help him relax and relieve stress. Akita thinks it's amazing that he's been really lucky. He believes he's found the best combat teacher possible. He's convinced that Subaru will teach him many things that Violent Girl would never teach. But just as he thinks about her, he sees her peeking through a window, watching him. Then Rikudo enters the place and comments that betraying her isn't very nice. Akita, confused, asks why she's there. Hearing them, Subaru asks if she's his girlfriend, but Akita denies it. Rikudo says she might get something good out of the situation, especially since Subaru is present. She approaches the champion and asks if he remembers what he once said, that everything outside of the male heavyweight category is just a sport. Akita remembers those words and thinks they were cruel. Subaru, for his part, asks if she's one of his online haters and apologizes if so. He's received lots of criticism online for that comment. She curiously asks if he'll take it back. He looks her in the eye and says no, that he didn't say anything but the truth. He insists heavyweight represents true martial arts. And if she disagrees, he asks why she doesn't fight in that category. He reveals that no one does and asks if she knows why. He says it's because no one has the courage to face them. Only in the heavyweight category can you find the strongest fighters, and that's the reality. Both youths fall silent until Rikudo smiles and says she's happy with that answer. She adds that if Akita truly wants to be the strongest, he won't turn down her next proposal. Then she directly asks him if he's willing to fight her. Rikudo asks if he agrees to fight her, leaving everyone present speechless, especially Akita, who, upon hearing that, asks where she got that idea from and if she's stupid. He questions whether she has the slightest idea who he is. She replies yes, and that she knows the famous MMA champion. At that moment, a man appears and asks the girl what she wants, adding that if she came to cause trouble, she better leave. But Akita clarifies that she's just an intern and is already leaving. However, the fighter intervenes and asks them to wait. He asks if she really just said that MMA is a sport. He then explains that this is not true since there's no way to hold back and questions how it can be considered a sport. Rikudo laughs and comments on the idea of not being able to hold back, telling him not to make her laugh. She begins to give examples of strikes that are forbidden. She adds that all those strikes are banned according to the regulations. Furthermore, she mentions that the fact that victory is defined by multiple rules makes it a sport, and asks if he disagrees. The man replies that obviously those strikes aren't allowed because it's not about eliminating the opponent. But only under those conditions can heavyweight fighters be considered the strongest. That's why he is the strongest in Japan, and he will also prove that he's the strongest in the world. However, Rikudo says that he is wrong. She claims she could be stronger than him and that she needs to defend her title as champion. The people nearby couldn't believe what they were hearing and thought that the student was hilarious. On the other hand, the fighter took it seriously, as he understood that she really wanted to fight. He replies that in the end, she'll get the fight she wanted so badly. She's glad about that, but the man from before tells her not to take what the student says too seriously. Nevertheless, Fuwa replies that it doesn't matter what he says, because she means it. She adds that she's not joking, since she truly believes she can beat him, and that's something unforgivable. Before starting, he tells her he has one condition. She can fight however she wants, but he will treat it as a simulation. Rikudo asks why, and he responds that he's a professional, and if he takes it seriously, it would be a problem. She agrees, saying there's no other way, and promises to show how pathetic he is. So, everyone heads to the place where the fight will take place, and Akita can't believe what's happening. His classmate is going to fight an MMA champion. Fuwa explains that it'll be a 5-minute round, and the loser will be whoever gets knocked out or withdraws first. She agrees to those rules, and the man from earlier asks Fuwa not to hurt her too much. He replies there's nothing to worry about, but admits that sometimes people get hurt even during training. The fight begins, and the girl quickly charges in. She kicks directly toward the groin. However, Fuwa manages to block it. He also says he knew she would aim straight for that. She prepares to attack again, but her opponent already knew she would go for the eyes and dodges the attack. Then, she throws a kick that nearly hits the fighter's face, but he manages to dodge it as well. He comments that it was close and that she tried to fool him with the initial attacks because her real target was that kick. Akita reflects that he was able to anticipate even the surprise attack and wonders what she'll do now. That's when Fuwa says it's his turn now. Before attacking, one of the most basic punching techniques in boxing is explained, the jab. A fast punch with the lead hand, less powerful but more risky. That's why it's used strategically to keep the opponent on the defensive. But a heavyweight's jab exceeds 111 kilograms of force. And that's exactly what Fuwa does. The punch lands directly on Rikudu's face. She falls to the ground, seemingly unconscious. Fuwa, seeing that, apologizes, saying he couldn't hold back. Akita is surprised to see that the feared Setsuna Rikudu fell with just one hit. Fuwa asks if she is okay and apologizes, as he couldn't hold back. He suggests she rest a little before leaving. Then he asks if someone can bring him some water. But at that moment, his coach yells at him to pay attention, just as Rikudu launches an attack. The man who had warned him is left speechless, and Akita thinks it was a direct hit to the face. However, upon closer observation, he sees that Fuwa blocked the attack. Rikudu then makes another move, a flying armbar. Both the man and Akita are stunned. The old man thinks she is crazy, convinced that Rikudu took the hit on purpose to execute that move. But then he grows worried, as Fuwa has been caught. The old man tells her to give up, warning that she's about to break his arm. At that moment, the fighter lifts both his arm and Rikudu into the air, only to slam her hard onto the ground. The man comments that it was a slam. However, Rikudu gets back up and resumes her fighting stance. That's when the old man asks if Fuwa is crazy, warning that he might end up eliminating her. But Fuwa replies that it's fine since she moved off him and adopted a defensive position. He also admits that she managed to surprise him and wonders if there are more women like her. He notes her eye attack was decisive, her kick fast and precise, and her armbar flawless. He concludes that these are clear signs of someone with real combat experience. He believes she could easily be mistaken for a professional. Rikudu thanks him for the compliments. But Fuwa isn't done and adds that because of all that, he feels sorry for her. This confuses her, but he explains that in MMA there's a common principle. Bigger and heavier fighters have a crushing advantage. He admits that she is skilled and far above average, but she could never become the strongest in the world. He says he understands that feeling because his own body isn't among the biggest in the heavyweight division. But thinking that skill alone will be enough in a fight is naive. That's why he believes the potential to be the strongest in the world is determined at birth. And looking her in the face, he tells her she doesn't have what it takes and should start by accepting that. She gives a faint smile and replies that she had no idea. But if that's the case, she wants to put his words to the test. She begins moving quickly and strikes him. He responds in kind. They exchange blows nonstop. The old man watching from outside thinks they're crazy and realizes she matches Fuwa in both speed and technique. But Akita notices a difference between them. Even though they're exchanging blows at the same time, his strength is on another level. It's right then that Fuwa lands a hit and immediately follows with another accurate strike. She falls and he positions himself on top. Then he asks, what will she choose, take hits for 2 minutes and 50 seconds or admit defeat? Rikudu, in response, raises her fists in a guard position. Fuwa remembers when he was a child, specifically on New Year's Eve. By chance, he came across a fight on a ring being broadcast on television. It was a battle where one could prove their masculinity by punching another, and the one who dominated in the end was considered the strongest in the world. Little Fuwa didn't dream of becoming a cartoon hero, but of becoming the strongest person in the world. That same night, after watching the fight, he wondered what he had to do to become the strongest. The answer he found was very simple. He had to give up everything. He got rid of his school books and video games, stopped hanging out with friends, and began skipping classes. His goal was greater, and he couldn't waste time. He didn't even care about having a girlfriend or making money. None of that mattered to him because he was happy with his purpose. Now in the present, Fuwa tells Rikudu that he will become the strongest in the world, and if he achieves that goal, nothing else matters. The girl smiles and gets ready to do something. A man who is observing the scene warns Fuwa to be careful because she is preparing a mount escape technique. Although at first glance that position seems impossible to escape, there are ways to get out of it. However, against a skilled fighter, maintaining the mount can be very difficult. But that only applies when both fighters are in the same weight class. Just then, Fuwa gets ready to attack. He starts throwing punches at Rikudu's face. It is revealed that Fuwa weighs twice as much as Rikudu. That prevents her from changing position or even turning around to free herself from the punches, which means that escaping is impossible. The man watching the fight reflects that Fuwa is serious as he keeps punching her without stopping. Rikudu keeps defending herself blow after blow. But then the fighter notices something strange and asks why she's smiling. The girl, upon hearing the question, is surprised and asks if she really was smiling. Fuwa tells her that he is hitting her head and that she should just surrender and go to the hospital. But she replies that she doesn't care, that she was just thinking that the scene looks very problematic. A grown man mounted on top of a helpless student, punching her without mercy. And if that image appeared on the news, his chances of becoming world champion would vanish. He responds that it's just training, but Rikudu questions him, reminding him that she is in her school uniform. Does he really think the media will believe that? She finds him very naive. The fighter, a bit curious, asks what the point of all that is, and the girl throws another question at him. Hasn't he figured it out yet? She then reveals that she's recording everything. Fuwa is shocked and immediately thinks of the boy who came with her, convinced that he is the one recording. But when he looks at him, he realizes that's not the case and that the boy is just watching. That moment of distraction is seized by Rikudu, who quickly applies a scissor lock. She manages to change position and finally escape the mount. Relieved, she comments that she finally managed to escape. Fuwa gets up immediately and yells at her if she's crazy, because what she did was cheating, and beyond that, made no sense. Rikudo justifies herself by saying that in the end, she managed to break free, but he yells that that's not the point. He says he understands that she used dirty tactics and even ignored the rules just to balance the strength between them. Even so, he questions her about what she said regarding recording. He points out that it only makes sense because she's a student and he's a professional fighter, and it was all just training. Besides, winning a fight that way won't make her the strongest in the world. Rikudo looks at him and asks what he's talking about. She never said she wanted to be the strongest in the world. All she wants is to defeat the person in front of her, and that's all.
The rear naked choke is a technique that presses the carotid artery with the arm, causing the lungs to falsely believe that blood is flowing to the brain. The body, in response, quickly lowers the pressure, which leads to a gradual loss of consciousness. This phenomenon is known as the carotid sinus reflex. Although the carotid artery is only about 5 to 9 millimeters thick, not much force is needed to trigger this effect, which means that even a student could be capable of defeating a heavyweight champion. Fuwa is in serious trouble, and his coach, seeing the situation, shouts that it's a foul. He states that the bell has already rung and questions what is wrong with that girl. The fighter, for his part, reflects instead of a cross punch, she's using a rear naked choke, and wonders how much strength she still has left. He clearly saw that the match had already ended, and yet she still has energy. Then Rikudu says there are still 10 seconds remaining. Just at that moment, the coach approaches to pull her away from Fuwa, but the man shouts not to interfere. This makes the coach ask what his problem is. The fighter finally understands. His instincts were right. The match isn't over yet, and there are still 10 seconds left to reach the 5-minute limit. He remembers when Rikudu fell onto the timer. Now that he thinks about it, she pretended to be exhausted and grabbed the stopwatch to fast forward it by 10 seconds. He assumes it was all planned to make him drop his guard, to make him believe the fight was already over. He can't believe she calculated everything from the beginning, even taking a hit on purpose. And if that's true, then all this time he was dancing in the palm of her hand. He reflects that he can't let himself get distracted now. He has to stay conscious, but only 10 seconds remain. He also knows he needs to escape. However, escaping a properly locked rear naked choke is nearly impossible. Not because of the difficulty of breaking the opponent's arm pressure, but because unconsciousness sets in so quickly. It's extremely hard to break free in such a short time. Time keeps passing as memories flood his mind. He even remembers when he told her she could do whatever she wanted. And in the end, she didn't break any rules. This is different from being attacked by surprise in the street. They're in an official match, and it feels like they're inside a proper ring. He reflects, frustrated, that perhaps he'll never become the strongest. He begins to hallucinate. He sees himself as a child asking if he is going to lose, and he firmly replies to himself, no, he's going to win, because he promised it. But deep inside, he admits a bitter truth. She turned out to be stronger, and for that reason, he can't afford to lose. With all his strength, he executes a technique that knocks her down. However, the girl quickly stands up again and launches her attack. Fuwa also prepares and delivers a devastating blow just as time runs out. The impact is so strong that it ends up breaking her neck. But to his surprise, Rikudu smiles at him and asks if that's all he's got. The man is paralyzed. He steps back horrified as Rikudu begins to grow and laugh with a chilling voice. It's then that he realizes what's truly happening, because in the end, he lost. Rikudu upon sensing Fuwa's defeat, offers him a final farewell and sweetly wishes him sweet dreams.
At another time, Akina reflects, incredulous, that he can't believe it. A girl with an adorable, slightly childlike face and a slender, well-shaped body with such defined curves that she could easily be mistaken for a model. She gives the impression of being a normal and healthy young woman. But Setsuna Rikudu is the girl who defeated a male heavyweight champion. Right after recalling that, Rikudu asks why he's looking at her like that and if he's fallen in love. The young man, a bit nervous, replies that no, that would never happen. However, he remembers again that after the fight, the unconscious fighter was left in the care of the academy team, and they left. Apparently, he would wake up later. The girl asks who he's fighting today and offers to secretly cheer him on. But Akina can't help but question how she can act so normal. He clearly remembers that she beat a heavyweight champion. Even though he knows she doesn't care about titles, he wants to know if she felt anything different after defeating someone so incredibly strong. She, a bit confused, asks if Fuwa was really that strong. Akina replies that of course he was, that he was a heavyweight champion. He reminds her that Fuwa made her fly through the air several times and asks if she doesn't remember. Rikudu admits that Fuwa's strength and skills were impressive, but adds that that was all. She assures that Fuwa had a big disadvantage in that fight. He couldn't kill her. Akina, surprised, asks what she means by that. She explains that in the end, she's the undisputed champion of middle school boy fights. If something had happened to her, if she had died or been seriously injured, it wouldn't be seen as an accident, which would mean the end of Fuwa's career. That's why, even when he was in a dominant position, Fuwa couldn't finish her. He was always holding back, trying not to hurt her. He was bound by social expectations, and that disadvantage was greater than any physical difference. She also points out that violence is not just about punches and kicks. According to her, Fuwa was weak when it came to real violence. At that moment, someone cuts in saying what she just said was pretty harsh. It turns out to be Fuwa himself who had heard everything. Rikudo, seeing him, is happy and quickly asks if he came for a rematch, assuring him she's more than ready. But he smiles and says he'll let it slide this time, though he'd like to chat a bit. He tells her that after they left, the place went into total chaos. His coach went crazy, saying that if word got out that he lost to a student, his market value would plummet. Rikudu says that sounds complicated, to which Fuwa replies not to talk as if it wasn't her fault. However, he lowers his gaze and turns around. Then he grabs Rikudu by the shoulders and asks if she'd be interested in becoming a professional MMA fighter. She immediately replies absolutely not. Fuwa admits he expected that answer, but says it's a shame. He believes she could even become a world champion. Still, he accepts that things are the way they are. He confesses that he gave everything to become the strongest in the world and fully dedicated himself to MMA. Physical training, technical practice, strategy analysis, and studying opponents' habits. Thanks to that, even as an amateur, he was unbeatable. But at some point, winning became his only goal. Soon, judges started evaluating how to win professionally with strategy and control. Then he asks Rikudu what goes through her mind when she fights. She answers that it's obvious, confessing that she thinks if she can finish off the person in front of her, that would be best. Fuwa, seeing her expression, tells her that her face is one of a kind. He confesses that being the strongest MMA fighter was his greatest dream. But at some point, he got used to the rules of the professional world. Upon hearing that, Rikudu asks if he plans to quit MMA. He replies no, that the strongest fighter he admired that day only exists in the ring. He believes the world MMA champion must truly be the strongest. That's why, when he becomes world champion, he wants her to fight him again. Rikudu, smiling, replies of course that she's available anytime. They bump fists, sealing a new friendship. Thus, it is revealed that after that encounter, Fuwa changed. He went from being a calculating fighter to becoming a wild and violent one. 3 years later, he became world champion. But before that happened, Rikudu asked Akina to enter an underground fight tournament, which left the boy completely shocked. She explains that underground martial arts are tournaments where criminals, biker gangs, and all kinds of dangerous people gather. Akina replies that if it's that risky, he doesn't want anything to do with it. But Rikudu tells him she doesn't care and will sign him up for the right tournament anyway. Akina, hearing her, says he thinks they're skipping a few steps. However, she assures him it's okay. She reminds him that he's much stronger now, that he even beat that delinquent, asking if he remembers. He nods and admits he might lose, but at least he'll give his best for a good fight. To which his friend replies with determination that she'll bet on him. At another time, Akita reflects that in the past, violence was simply a primitive desire. On the other hand, techniques were the result of human intelligence, something that goes against instincts, a complete contradiction. There is only one way both things can become compatible: honest discipline. That's why he starts training, telling himself he must hit the same target again and again. No homework, no friends, no girls, he just wants to train. But then he wonders, why did he want to learn from her? He remembers that rage and humiliation mean nothing. That's why if he hits Setsuna Rikudu, it'll feel good. He reflects that for that one reason, he's enduring all this training. So, at school, Rikudu announces they're going to begin. She immediately charges at him, starting the training, or rather, hitting him. With one blow, she knocks him down. Then she explains that today's lesson is a liver punch. Due to its sensitivity, getting hit there causes extreme pain. She comments that it's almost like a kick to the groin, although she confesses she has no idea what that actually feels like. Akita, recovering from the hit, yells, demanding that she at least explain the technique before demonstrating it. He knows she promised to teach him to fight, but he didn't expect to become her punching bag. She replies that he learns faster when his body remembers the pain, but he insists it seems like she just wants to hit him. Even so, he admits he doesn't care as long as she really teaches him something, because all he knows is a low kick. Then the girl asks if he wants to train with repetitions. Akita replies it's not like he has another choice. Rikudu nods, assuring him it's okay, that he'll definitely get stronger. And so, they continue the training. Akita reflects that there's a good reason to endure such torturous training. The underground fight is approaching. Then he remembers when he asked Rikudu about her participation in an underground fight. He replied that he didn't really know what that was, and she simply said it was an underground fight. Akita replied that he understood that part, but didn't understand why it had to be underground, saying it sounded scary. He even jokes that someone could pull a knife or bring a lion into the ring. Rikudu laughs and says those ideas sound like they're from a manga. Then she promises to sum up the concept. She explains that an underground fight is a match held without official authorization. It originated from MMA clubs that hosted their own matches outside of the federations. Over time, some criminals started getting involved. During that period of uncertainty, many groups emerged and disappeared. But the underground world remained stable. Amateur MMA fighters replaced the more problematic ones, and nowadays, many fighters wanted by the industry have gained fame through live streams. That's why there are currently various amateur tournaments. It all depends on the event. She adds that Akita's fight will be broadcasted, and that high school fighters like him can gain popularity. She even jokes that if he wins, he might become more popular with the girls, which lifts his spirits a bit. He reflects that it's worth trying to test his strength, and that if it's not a serious MMA tournament, at least he'll get to see some interesting fights. Then Rikudu raises her voice and says it's time to give it his all. The day of the event finally arrives, and they both show up at the place where the underground fight will be held. Akita, visibly nervous, calls out to Rikudu. She tells him that this is the Bachi Bachi underground fight group. She reveals that the business is a front for illegal activities and that its main source of income comes from the Yakuza. Although she clarifies that those are just rumors, since half of the fighters were arrested and then placed under house arrest. With a smile, she adds that they're going to have a lot of fun in that tournament. Akita, outraged, tells her to stop joking about it. He points at the fighters and asks if she brought him there to die. He immediately says he's leaving, but she asks him to wait. She encourages him, saying that if he shows his true power, he'll win. She guarantees it. Akita asks on what basis she says that. Then Rikudu tells him to look at his opponent. She reveals he looks like someone from the Japanese mafia, which terrifies the boy even more, and he says it's decided, he's leaving now. Akira couldn't help but feel nervous. It seemed absurd. A simple high school student and a thug-looking guy were about to face each other in a real fight. But before the fight began, while he was getting ready, his friend asked if he was okay. She reminded him that, besides her, no one else had come to see him. With a serious look, she confessed she wanted to see him become the Bachi Bachi champion, and asked him not to lose a single fight. Akira, puzzled, asked what she meant by that. Rikudo explained that the competition level could rise at any moment, as a trained fighter might suddenly show up wanting to show off against amateurs. She added that if she were in his place, she would never allow defeat to catch her. That if she ever lost, it would only be once because she couldn't stand someone looking at her that way again. Hearing her, Akira questioned her, not understanding why she was saying something so extreme. He reminded her they were still in school, but Rikudu replied coldly that everything would be fine, as long as he won. He just had to do that. Akira watched her in silence. He thought saying it was easy, But doing it was another story. She said it like it was something simple. He turned his gaze toward his opponent. With a defiant look, the guy made an intimidating gesture that made him nervous, drawing a mocking giggle from Rikudu. The opponent mocked him openly, saying he looked like an otaku who decided to step up for the first time, and that he'd knock him out in 10 seconds. The tension kept rising. The crowd roared violently, yelling to destroy him, to kill him. Akira remained silent, but it was clear the pressure was affecting him. In his mind, he couldn't ignore the truth. His opponent was scary, and so was the crowd. Outside the ring, Rikudu tried to downplay the threat. With a mocking smile, she murmured that those who covered themselves in tattoos and talked too much were usually the weakest. Her words ignited Akita's fury, who reacted immediately, mentally begging her not to provoke him like that. The referee finally stepped to the center of the ring and gave the order that marked the start of the match. The fighters had to take their positions. Despite the chaos around him, the young man remained calm. He watched his opponent closely, and based on what he had seen earlier, he didn't seem that strong. The other one, on the contrary, smiled confidently, flaunting his tattooed body and intimidating attitude. He called himself a fighter, but the truth was different. He had never had real martial experience. His record was underwhelming. 1 win, 4 losses, and only 1 knockout to his name. Despite his aggressive appearance, he was just an intimidating amateur. Nothing more. Also, Akita had already reviewed footage of his previous fights and was certain. In the ring, that guy was still a rookie. Even so, he couldn't let his guard down. If the opponent had a hidden technique or managed to counter effectively, the fight could get complicated. He was also an amateur, but he had a strong point. He had mastered calf kicks. And in a fight like this, that could make a difference. Seconds before the start, Akita, a bit nervous, asked Rikudu if she had any advice. The girl, calm and smiling, replied that if he managed to land a hit, he would win. The young man sighed internally. He knew she was right, but that kind of advice wasn't much help at the moment. With his heart pounding, he got into fighting stance. In front of him, his opponent stood confidently. The referee raised his voice energetically. The fight was on. The fight had begun. Both stared intensely at each other, and Akita tried to stay calm. He remembered winning the previous match and thought he could win this one too. Analyzing the situation, he knew that if he landed the first hit, he could take the victory. With determination, he lunged forward. All he needed was to land 1 clean kick, just 1. Without hesitation, he aimed directly at his opponent's calf. But at that moment, he made a mistake. A small miscalculation. A simple, yet crucial error. His opponent dodged the kick easily. Until then, Akita had only fought using the calf kick. He had never prepared for a more complex fight. A real fight involved many more elements than a single move. His opponent, on the other hand, was trained to adapt to different situations, ready to fight under any condition. Even if the calf kick was effective, without a feint to support it, dodging it became natural. Akita realized in that moment that his move had been effortlessly anticipated. His face showed confusion. What had once worked was no longer enough. That was when Rikudu saw Akita take a punch to the face. The impact knocked him down. When he opened his eyes, he realized he was already on the ground. He reflected on what had just happened, but his friend shouted at him to get up. His opponent was rushing toward him. Akita quickly fled to the corner to stand up, while the tattooed guy demanded he stop running and face him already. Panning, Akita processed what had happened. It had been too obvious. Even a beginner would have dodged such a predictable kick. He acknowledged the obvious, even if it hurt. Everything he had planned so far had been focused solely on attacking. But it wasn't that Akita was clumsy or naive. He had simply made a common rookie mistake. Individual training, though useful, has its limits. Hitting the bag, repeating moves, perfecting technique, all of that is done alone. But no matter how much progress one feels, it's not the same as a real fight. Unless you train with a partner, facing real scenarios and adapting, you're still ineffective in a real fight. He only knew how to use the low kick, and that no longer worked. What could he do now? The tension in the ring grew with every second. The audience watched intently as Akita tried to regain his rhythm. Without warning, he threw a direct punch, confident that this time it would land. But his opponent dodged precisely, spinning fluidly. With a clean movement, he landed a punch on Akita, who didn't even have time to react. Then, from the stands, a voice rose, sounding a bit confused. A young man, recognizing Akita, asked aloud what he was doing there. Rikudu looked at him amused and, with an ironic smile, called him her dear classmate. Ikushima didn't hide his annoyance. He pronounced her name firmly, asking her not to forget it. What bothered him most wasn't Rikudu's presence, but that she still had the nerve to speak to him so familiarly. After all, she was the one who had knocked him out last time. Rikudu, for her part, asked what he was doing there. Ikushima explained that after being demoted in karate, he decided to switch to MMA. He used the moment to demand a rematch, still hurt by the past humiliation. She casually accepted without hesitation, saying whenever he wanted. Meanwhile, Ikushima watched the fight skeptically. He didn't understand what someone like Akita was doing in an underground match. He admitted Akita's low kick wasn't bad, but it clearly wasn't enough. In the ring, Akita tried to land one of his kicks, but the opponent always stayed one step ahead. Comments from the sidelines began to roll in. Some mocked him, noting he couldn't land a single hit. In a moment of carelessness, he took another punch straight to the face. Someone muttered under their breath, almost resigned, that he got hit again. Ikushima, curious, asked why Rikudu wasn't stepping in, since even though both were amateurs, the referee wasn't stopping the fight. She replied that it wasn't time yet. She explained that Akita had a lot of potential, and that if he realized it, he could win. That left Ikushima confused. Meanwhile, in the ring, Akita took another hit. His opponent threatened to finish him, but someone from outside shouted for him to wait, that the boy could still fight back. Rikudu commented that, unfortunately, he wasn't capable of that yet, so his opponent was safe. Ikushima was surprised. He didn't expect to hear that from her. Akita began to get up, thinking it hurt, that he was exhausted, and he didn't understand why he kept doing this. He remembered he was just a student with a bright future at a good university. That was his path. Then he wondered, what kind of life did that tattooed guy lead? He thought he couldn't take it anymore, that it was better to give up. He believed that if violence was the only way to stop those people, then it made no sense. But then he paused for a second and concluded that the only fool was himself. Because if he ran away from violence, everything would repeat. He had to hit him, at least once. The crowd and his opponent were surprised to see him stand up once again. Ikushima commented that it was dangerous. Rikudu asked why. The young man explained that the opponent had improved his stance and was probably expecting another low kick from Akita. It was so obvious it looked like a trap. He revealed that the weakness of a low kick was the counterattack. If the kick was strong, the counter would be stronger, and the damage severe. Akita could get seriously hurt. The young man got ready. His opponent, watching him, said he was ready, and that he was set. When Akita moved, the tattooed guy prepared a punch. However, Akita stopped his attack at the last moment, and his opponent punched the air. Taking advantage of that moment, the student landed a clean punch to his opponent's face. The crowd went wild, unable to believe what they had just seen. Many wondered what had happened, as the tattooed guy fell to the ground, knocked out. Ikushima shouted that it was his technique. Rikudu, excited, celebrated the hit, even delighted by the name of the technique. But Ikushima explained that he hadn't named it. He had read it in a karate magazine. He demanded to know when Akita had practiced that technique. Rikudu replied that he hadn't, that he had seen it that day and managed to imitate it, to a certain extent. Besides, the level of perfection was very low. She asked if he didn't think so too. Ikushima wondered what she was talking about. He thought it made no sense. In karate, you should never use a technique you don't know because the fear of losing is too great. But in MMA, if you mess up, you get hit, and not lightly. It was obvious you shouldn't use a technique without practicing it. Doing so was almost a survival instinct. He looked at Akita and admitted that this time, it was different. That student who used to be submissive, the one he could force to kneel and beg, was now someone else. Without a doubt, Rikudu Setsuna had corrupted him. Right at that moment, Akita smiled at his victory, while Rikudu declared that the MMA fight was over, and that now it was time for violence. The crowd goes wild upon seeing that Moyashi has fallen, something many considered impossible. However, the man begins to rise, surprising even his own coach. The fighter declares that it didn't hurt him at all and that he can still stand. In that instant, Akira moves again and lands another direct blow to his face. While doing so, he wonders what's going on. He reflects that even though Moyashi dodged his low kick, his imitation of the lightning punch still connected. Rikudo, who watches the fight closely, comments that it's all about choices. The boy next to her asks what she means. Then Rikudu explains with a baseball metaphor. If the batter expects a fastball, he prepares for it. But if the pitcher throws a curveball instead, the batter is out. The same applies to the fight. If the opponent expects a low kick, he won't dodge a lightning punch. At that moment, Akira lands another hit, which delights Rikudu, who excitedly says he landed it again. Moyashi, furious, curses him and launches a counterattack, but Akira dodges it swiftly. The boy comments that Moyashi's attacks aren't working. since he's taken 3 hits and still has plenty of energy. Rikudu explains that it was an improvised hit, and there's not much that can be done with that. But the opposite is also true. His opponent isn't fighting well either. At that point, Akira feels pushed to the limit. He thinks he won't win with lightning punches alone. Rikudo, observing him, says that as long as the enemy expects the low kick, the lightning punch will be effective. But if he starts expecting the lightning punch, then the low kick will work. And just at that moment, Akira lands a precise low kick that knocks down his opponent. The crowd erupts in joy, many wondering where that kick came from. Rikudo, ecstatic, believes he's following her advice to the letter. Ikushima thinks the same, surprised by Akira's progress, and asks what kind of training she had him do. The girl replies that she simply had him practice every day for a long time. The boy can't believe it. He finds it impossible to become so strong with just that. Then Rikudu reveals that she made him repeat the same moves around 10,000 times a day. She adds that the 10,000 repetitions were a joke, but watching him fight, it seems he took it seriously. The boy finds it brutal. Training with just one repetitive move is boring, but without distractions from other techniques, it's possible to repeat the same kick 10,000 times each day. He thinks Akira is the serious type, irritatingly serious, and that's exactly his real talent. The crowd notices something strange. Moyashi is dragging his left foot, and some think he no longer has strength in that leg. Rikudu notices it too and thinks things are about to get even more interesting. At that moment, Akira lands another low kick. Rikudo explains that even if Moyashi changes his stance to avoid more kicks, Akira can still react and counterattack, since he also practiced the reverse move. This way, he lands another kick without giving space for a reaction. She also adds that if the opponent starts dodging the kicks, he'll get hit with the lightning punch instead. This causes fear to take over Moyashi's body. No matter what he does, he'll be attacked, and that completely suppresses his will to fight. Then Akira begins to hit him even more intensely. The crowd cheers him on, and the boy asks Rikudu if Akira is okay. The girl replies that she loves all of this, that he's absorbing the applause and getting even stronger. She says this is what it means to be alive, that every drop of that emotion is incredibly fun. She reveals that Akira was smiling as he landed yet another blow, finally knocking Moyashi down and winning the fight. The boy looks at Rikudu, who congratulates him with a thumbs up. He celebrates immediately. Elsewhere in the audience, someone asks who won. A woman replies that it was a boy participating for the first time, but she doubts Lord Mitsuru would care about something like that, since he considers the boy weak. However, another man asks Shiratori if she still doesn't get it. He says that no matter how strong someone is, the important thing is whether they remain interesting. He adds that it was decided long ago the best entertainment is illegal substances, fantasy fruits, and violence. Thus ends the fight, and Rikudu congratulates Akira for his performance. However, the boy soon becomes confused upon noticing Ikushima's presence. The girl smiles and says she came to support him, asking if he doesn't think it's cute. But the boy gets annoyed and yells at her not to mess with him. Suddenly, some men from the audience begin climbing into the ring. One of them tells Akira not to act so important. Akira, confused, wonders where the referee is. Before he can react, one of the men hits him, claiming it's payback. Someone in the audience shouts that they shouldn't be in the ring. Meanwhile, Ikushima asks what's going on, and Rikudu, smiling excitedly, comments that this is just the beginning. She explains that the specialty of the Bachi Bachi tournament is precisely the massive brawl. The fighters here fight more outside the ring than inside because even the spectators want to join in. She adds that the organization can't control that, and Ikushima concludes that this group is really strange. But Rikudu says she doesn't mind, and punches one of the intruders, just as Akira begins to suspect that was the reason she made him fight here. And it seems he's right because even his own teammates join the fight. Then outside the ring, someone yells for everyone to stop immediately. Everyone freezes. Some even seem to recognize the voice. A man steps into the ring and comments that a fight can really stir emotions. However, since the fighters are already exhausted, he asks them to leave the area. He then congratulates them for their good work. One of the men present shouts at him with contempt, asking who he thinks he is and curses him. The mysterious man focuses on him and says it's good to have that energy. Then he grabs him by the shoulder and says that now the real show is about to begin. He calls for Akira Masamichi to come closer and enthusiastically yells for the fight to begin. The man already in the ring asks what he's talking about. The mysterious figure replies that he stepped into the ring to fight Akita, asking him to face him. However, the other man refuses, saying he doesn't want to fight now. Then the mysterious figure gets angry and orders him to leave. He says that if he didn't come here to act tough, he shouldn't pretend to be. He adds that he shouldn't follow the herd like everyone else. He asks him if he can't think or act for himself and questions what value a life like that has. He declares it simply boring. The man replies by asking if he wants to fight him and also demands to know who the hell he is. That's when someone introduces him. He's broadcasted live MMA fights and crossed the boundaries of all combat genres. He's the successor of Japanese entertainment, the country's greatest promoter, Hikaru Bara Mitsuru. Ikushima, shocked, asks aloud what someone that important is doing in a place like this. Rikudo replies that she thinks he's also the producer of Karakuri Zakari. Mitsuru then addresses Akita directly. He approaches and declares that he finds him interesting. He adds that not many can punch someone while enjoying it, especially after taking a beating. Akita reflects that it makes sense and admits that he felt a bit happy to receive praise from someone so famous, although he's not sure if it was really praise. That's when Mitsuru reveals his intention. He wants to buy his violence and invites him to participate in an event he's organizing. The audience is shocked by such a declaration. Ikushima thinks it must be a joke. He can't believe Mitsuru Hikarubara is watching Akita. Mitsuru directly asks what he thinks about his proposal. Akita remains thoughtful while also noticing that the man's grip is incredibly strong. Suddenly, Mitsuru looks at Rikudo and comments that she's very cute. He asks Akita if she's his girlfriend, to which he replies no. Without warning, Mitsuru walks up to Rikudo, greets her, and kisses her. After that, he comments that she tastes good. Rikudo reacts instantly and throws an elbow, but Mitsuru dodges it. He praises the move and says she's interesting too. Akita, witnessing the scene, asks if he really dodged Rikudo's elbow and how he could kiss someone so casually, once again wondering who this guy is. Before the situation escalates into a fight with Rikudo, Mitsuru raises his hand and asks everyone to stop. He says this is about Akita and asks for his answer. The young man firmly replies that he refuses. He adds that it's not right to act inappropriately with a high school girl. Mitsuru is surprised by his answer and admits it was a bit harsh. Akita responds honestly, stating that he wants nothing to do with professional fighting or that world. Rikudo hears this and bursts out laughing, saying that's exactly what she'd expect from Akita. Ikushima, meanwhile, asks him to reconsider, saying it's a great opportunity, but he insists that he doesn't want to become a professional fighter. Mitsuru listens silently and then asks if that's his final decision. Finally, he says it's fine, but declares that he wants his talent anyway. He adds that it doesn't matter, he'll have it, and leaves the place with that final declaration. Thus ends a long day. All that remains from the fight is exhaustion, pain, and the joy of victory. But one lesson also remains. In the face of overwhelming violence from the strong, senseless cruelty leaves the weak with only one possible choice: despair. And so the story continues, because on May 31st at midnight somewhere in Tokyo, the Akita household is engulfed in flames. At school, many students were talking about Akita's house that had burned down. One of his classmates said she felt sorry for him, as she believed he was still in a bit of shock since he remained there in the same place even after class had ended. Then someone called out to him. It was Rikudo, who asked if he wanted to train that day. But the young man asked to be left alone. He explained he wasn't in a good mood for that and asked if she knew his house had burned down. The girl replied that she already knew, but said his family hadn't been hurt, so everything was fine. That made the young man cry, as he felt it wasn't something to talk about at a time like that. After class, a woman approached the student and asked if he was Akita Masamichi. Then, she thanked him for his participation in Bachi Bachi and revealed that producer Mitsuhara wanted to have a conversation with him. She asked him to get in the car and offered that his classmate could come along if he wanted. Both students looked at each other, and Rikudo asked where they were going, showing anxiety. They arrived at a building and followed the secretary, who asked for permission to enter. There was Mitsuhara, who welcomed them, apologized for calling him so suddenly, and asked him to sit down. He added that surely alcohol was prohibited and asked the secretary to bring something non-alcoholic. The woman said she would bring it soon. Mitsuhara asked if they hadn't had dinner yet and offered to eat while they talked, also inviting Rikudo, which the girl appreciated. But Akita called the man and asked why he had burned down his house. Hearing the question, the man confessed that he was a direct person and expected it, considering Akita one of the good ones. Then he answered yes, that he had burned down his house and that the reason was purely for entertainment. He then asked Akita Masamichi to participate in an event he was organizing, themed around violence. He questioned whether Akita didn't want to see true violence, mentioning that it had been ignored by society for a long time, in an era where delinquents no longer fought. He pointed out that many had never thrown or received a single punch. On the other hand, there are men who train seriously to be strong, but that has become something far from real violence. That violence close to a street fight has evolved technically and become a sport. It didn't matter if it was legal or illegal, violence had disappeared. He asked if that was fun for them and said that, for him, it was completely boring. He confessed that what he wanted was original violence, without preparation, without rules. Just horrible and cruel violence. That's why he had something to declare. He announced that in a no-rules violence reality show, he promised to show them true violence, adding that the details would be brutal and asking them to look forward to it. Rikudo, upon hearing that, asked who he was talking to. Mitsuhara approached and called out to Akita, revealing that he was already part of his plan and that, for the success of that reality show, his participation was undoubtedly essential. He apologized for having burned down his house and asked if he was angry about it. The young man replied that he wasn't angry. He also said he understood, and that it wasn't the first time he'd seen something like that happen. He mentioned that the weak had no right to complain, and that no matter what had been done to him, violence was the only rule in that world. Therefore, he had no choice but to participate, since he wanted to become stronger. Upon hearing that, Mitsuhara laughed with joy, said that Akita was someone different, and confessed that he was starting to like him. Akita asked if he was serious, adding that he didn't like his face preparing a punch. But the punch missed as Mitsuhara dodged it. He laughed and said he was happy about that because now his event would be even more interesting. He asked not to worry, that he would guarantee good treatment. But then, Rikudo landed a punch on Mitsuhara's face, sending him flying. So she declared that it seemed like a very interesting event and asked if she could also participate. Already on the ground, Mitsuhara laughed and admitted it was a good hit. He began to get up and confessed that his legs were shaking a lot, admitting that she was pure violence. Rikudo asked if he would let her join his little event, but the man, with a smile, replied no, leaving both students speechless. The girl asked why, and Mitsuhara replied that it was for her own good, as it would be more interesting if she didn't take part in a no-rules fight. He also asked her to listen, arguing that entertainment, in the end, could only be created with intuition, although he had ended up following his senseless instincts. He looked at her and asked her to believe him, assuring her that for her and for the whole world, it would be something incredible. Upon hearing that, Rikudo looked at him and withdrew her hands. That made Akita think she would hit him again. But no, she replied that she understood and walked away. Mitsuhara said that since she understood, he would explain more details. But Akita thought that she accepted that argument without resistance. Then Mitsuhara explained that the concept of a no-rules fight was to have uncontrolled violence. In other words, it was about recreating real street fights. However, he confessed there were 3 minimal rules to make it possible. First, the event would use a ranking system, composed of 100 participants. If someone won a match, they went up. If they lost, they went down. If they avoided a match, they also went down. Second, participants could fight anyone, anywhere, and victory was decided when the opponent was incapacitated or surrendered. Lastly, all participants had to wear a ring, an object that monitored the user's vital signs and determined when they were incapacitated. Surrender was also possible through the ring. Finally, he revealed that was all, and the person who followed the rules and ended up in first place after 3 months would become the champion of the no-rules fighting event. He showed suitcases full of money, as the prize would be 1 billion yen, approximately $6.7 million. Upon hearing that, Akita was surprised and asked if it was some kind of joke. The man, seeing his reaction, confessed that if he was surprised, then it was worth preparing all that. He said he had been thinking about it for a long time and always wondered how he could make violence spread as the ultimate form of entertainment. Since real violence wouldn't just be a substitute like martial arts, and knowing that right now violence was considered taboo, the first thing he had to change was that. Therefore, what he needed was a star. He believed that the masses didn't have the ability to judge right and wrong, and that what a star did would be considered good. That's why he would make the champion of the No Rules event a star, and through television, media, and social networks, that celebrity would strongly promote the platforms, redefining violence as something good, so the masses would consume more violence and would undoubtedly become addicted to it. He shouted enthusiastically to Akita to participate, to create together a world full of violence. He asked what he thought of it and if he was motivated now. At that moment, Mitsuhara's secretary grabbed his arm and informed him it was time for his next appointment. The man couldn't believe it, admitting he had many more things he wanted to talk about. However, the woman took him away, and the man apologized for that while shouting to Akita to count on him and that the No Rules event was eagerly waiting for him. After that meeting, both students left. Akita commented that it was bad, that the violence show was too much, and wondered why he had to be forced into something like that. He looked at Rikudu and commented that ever since he got involved with her, it had been one problem after another. Then Rikudu called out to him and confessed that she was glad to hear that, and that life was finally starting to get interesting. The young man wondered in his mind if she would really say that to someone whose house had burned down. But then he laughed and answered that maybe she would. As they walked, Rikudu called out to him again and asked where he was staying now, since she knew his house had burned down. The young man replied that apparently the government would lend him temporary public housing, although it was very far from school. The girl thought for a bit and asked what about his family, to which the boy replied that he had his parents and a younger sister, something Rikudu understood. Then she asked if, in case his younger sister were taken hostage, would he be able to abandon her? The young man answered no, saying there was no way that would happen. But then he questioned if she was saying that a participant in the No Rules event could take his sister hostage. Rikudu replied yes, and asked if he hadn't heard the rules. She explained that it was okay to fight whenever, wherever, and with whoever they wanted. So, attacking the opponent's family was a fairly common tactic. She believed even a kind person could break into someone's home at night. Akita asked what kind of common sense that was, but Rikudo continued her argument, saying at the very least, he should spend some time away from his family. The young man mentally confessed that he wanted to ask who would commit such a crime, but he knew that if someone like Rikudu got involved, that could really happen. Also, he knew that lately he had been caught up in truly dangerous things, more than he had imagined. After thinking a lot, Rikudu commented that she didn't have much to do and asked him to follow her. They both arrived at a huge building. Inside, the young man thought it was a condominium tower, and that he had never been in something like that before. It looked like a kind of hotel. Already in the elevator, Akita asked why she had brought him to that place. When they arrived on a floor, she asked him to enter, leaving him a bit confused. Until Rikudu revealed that this was her home and that she lived alone, so there was nothing to worry about. The young man, seeing the place, commented that she lived in a very nice apartment. The girl then said she had come up with a way to guarantee his family's safety and get lots of training, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So she asked him to live with her, just the 2 of them, leaving the young man speechless. Akita, while bathing, reflected on the terrible situation he was in. He remembered that his house had been burned down and that he had been forced to participate in a violent reality show. Now, on top of that, he was using the bathroom at his classmate's house. As he was leaving, he bumped into something, the laundry basket, which spilled all of Rokudu's underwear. Akita picked up a piece and muttered to himself that it belonged to his classmate, once again realizing how truly terrible his situation was. After the bath, he began looking around the apartment and wondered if she lived alone in a place like that. He commented that the feminine decoration and the training equipment were a total mismatch. And when he remembered that from now on he would be living with her, he felt a little anxious. Then Rokudu came back from the bathroom. When he saw her, Akita was startled and quickly asked what had happened to her clothes, noticing that she seemed to be wearing only 1 garment. The girl explained that she always wore that at home, showing that she had shorts underneath. At the same time, Akita asked her not to lift her shirt. Rokudo, happy, emphasized how glad she was that they would now be together for a while and asked him to get used to the situation. The young man could only comment that he was getting very anxious. After that brief moment, Rokudo said it was time to begin and asked if they could start the special training. Akita, surprised, questioned if it had to be right then. His friend replied that yes, from now on, it was a 24-hour training opportunity. He, freshly bathed and aware that it was late, asked why they couldn't just sleep first. Instead, Rokudu placed a hand on his shoulder and immediately struck him. The girl was surprised at how well he defended himself. Akita replied that he had already expected her to throw a punch. Rokudu, pleased with his attitude, stated that he was definitely getting stronger and that she was proud of him. However, the young man questioned if he could really get used to her personality. The girl began to walk away, saying she was looking forward to the later training, which led Akita to ask her what she was planning to do. Rokudu replied that it was a secret, which annoyed the young man, who said that surprises weren't necessary. Just then his phone rang. It was Mitsuhara. He greeted him, and upon hearing his voice, Akita asked how he had gotten it. Mitsuhara didn't answer. He only said he had something to tell him. He asked him to make sure he wore the ring they had given him that morning and to be careful, because if he removed it on purpose, he would be disqualified. Before hanging up, he added that he should turn on the TV. Akita asked why, and Mitsuhara urged him to hurry, as time was running out. When he turned on the TV, Akita saw that a program was on the air, briefly interrupted by commercials. Then Mitsuhara appeared, asking the audience if they wanted to see true violence, real fights between strong people, and anything goes. He explained that 100 individuals were fighting in a ruleless qualifying battle for a grand prize of 1 billion yen. Each fight would have no rules. Akita, surprised, asked if it was a national broadcast. Rokudu commented that Mitsuhara must have spent a lot of money. Mitsuhara introduced some contestants: a super athlete of judo, a real Aikido defender, the strongest female kickboxer, a legendary fighter, a high school jujutsuka girl, a professional MMA fighter, a suspect just out of prison, a grandmaster of the Mugenryu style, and finally an ordinary high school student. Very high. Seeing his own photo, Akita was shocked. Rokudu marveled, saying that this was his national debut. Mitsuhara explained that the other contestants were also a mix of skilled and eccentric fighters, and that their violence would be a roaring wave of passion. Finally, he asked the viewers if they were ready to go crazy for violence without rules, and announced the start of the show. Both students fell silent, until Akita asked why Mitsuhara was against him. Rokudu said it was because he had hit her, but the young man remembered that she was the one who hit him. She, without losing her humor, commented that maybe he had become famous because of it, and that he would undoubtedly be an easier target for the other participants. That made Akita question if it was true. His friend replied that they had no choice but to make him stronger quickly, so they decided to start training. With the series of moves, he easily won any fight. After the low kick and the lightning punch, came the time for the third technique. Akita mentally wondered if it was really necessary to do the entire series. The girl explained that constantly getting stronger was the best way and that now she also needed to strengthen him by the shortest route possible. She added that the third combat move was groundwork and asked him to get ready because starting today, from morning till night, they would both be doing a special groundwork training, fully involved. Hearing that, Akita thought of something else and thanked puberty. On the other hand, in a small house, a middle-aged man is having breakfast. This event takes place before Akita and Rikudu started living together. Then, a girl enters and the man greets her with a good morning, calling her Aoi. But the girl does not answer him and only returns the greeting to her mother, who does the same. The daughter also tells her mother that she will not have dinner with them that night, and the woman asks if she will be eating with him. The girl replies that she will. It is then that the middle-aged man asks her to wait a moment and asks if she has a boyfriend. She calls him an idiot in response, then says she won't have breakfast and leaves the place. After that, at work, Watanabe's boss yells at him and asks how many years he has been in the labor market. The man, embarrassed, admits it is his fault and apologizes. That scene is witnessed by his co-workers, who comment that he is getting scolded again, and that his boss does not need to do it in front of everyone. They also wonder why Watanabe is always picked on. A young man responds that it is a fact since Watanabe is always trampled on because he never gets angry no matter what is done to him. Later that night, Watanabe leaves a store with something to eat when he sees a couple of young men drinking on the street. Just then, he accidentally kicks one of the beer cans. That annoys one of the boys, who yells at him that he spilled beer on him and demands that he pay for his mistake. The middle-aged man replies that he didn't do it on purpose and apologizes, but the young man grabs him by the tie and asks what that has to do with him. Then, he orders him to go to the convenience store and buy the spilled beer. The other young men behind take the opportunity to also ask him for cigarettes. Without warning, Watanabe kicks the thug in the face and immediately takes a fighting stance. Another young man asks what he thinks he is doing and rushes to attack. But the man not only dodges the blow, but also counterattacks. A third young man responds with a punch, but Watanabe manages to break his arm and then his leg. The last young man asks who he is, and the man replies that he is just an ordinary middle-aged man launching into the attack. After that display of power, Watanabe rides the subway. He reflects that it has been years since he started doing that. He admits to himself that he kicked the can on purpose to fight, and confesses that he knows he should stop doing it, although that is his way of venting his frustrations. However, he wonders how it is possible that this does not satisfy him. He begins to cry. He confesses to himself that he wants to hit more, that he wants to kick more, that he longs with all his being to crush more people with blows. But he does not do it because he fears being arrested and losing his family and his job, affirming to himself that he is weak. When he arrives home, his wife informs him that a package has arrived for him. The man thinks that it must be destiny. The next day, while having breakfast, his daughter enters and he greets her with a good morning. But then the girl notices something strange and asks what that is. It is revealed that Watanabe had a watch that displayed his ranking. With Rikudu back, she comments that with that technique she can defeat anyone in a fight, stating that the third step is ground techniques. The young man, upon hearing that, wonders if they are going to practice together. The girl affirms yes, and that he can use her body as he wishes. But Akita replies that he doesn't know if that would be appropriate, stating that, even if it's just training, for a boy and a girl to do those things in a closed room is complicated. Rikudo, upon hearing him, realizes what he means. She laughs and comments that if he wants, they can do something indecent. She starts approaching him and affirms that it will be so. Already by his side, she makes a quick move, concluding with a flying triangle. Akita, seeing where he is, wonders if he is there again. He questions if she did something indecent, but upon looking at her, he realizes that it's not the case and that she started everything. After a while, Akita wakes up somewhat frightened, and Rikudu welcomes him. She reveals that what she applied on him was a flying triangle. But the young man wonders what happened to him, and the girl confesses that he fainted for about a minute. The young man asks how that was possible, and Rikudu asks him to think with her. If that were a fight, in just 1 minute, she could eliminate her opponent. And once dominated, it's a deadly skill. That being part of the beauty of ground techniques. Akita, upon hearing that, confesses that it seems strong and that now he is more motivated. Rikudo is glad about that and also comments that it's not something he can use with just 1 or 2 days of practice. That leaves the young man confused, and the girl explains, for example, that in the triangle the opponent can move, so maintaining the perfect position is complicated. And if he escapes, the one who applied the triangle can end up in a disadvantageous position. So it's not something recommended for beginners. Akita questions why she is teaching him that if in the end it's an advanced technique. The girl replies that's why they are going to practice all night and asks him not to think about sleeping. The next day at school, the blonde boy is thoughtful and wonders how Akita is after seeing his house on fire, and if he really appeared on television. The girl next to him replies that if he's worried, the best thing is to talk to him. But the blonde boy replies that he won't do it, to which the girl comments that she already knew he would say something like that, and that's why she already asked. She reveals that she heard he is living together with Rikudu, and that they are alone, just the two of them. The young man asks if that's serious. However, he affirms that must be fine since, after all, they are students. The girl affirms that sounded very naughty. Right away, she wonders how far they have gone, and the blonde boy affirms that Akita is not the type to do those things. Then they see Rikudu calling Akita. She approaches him and comments that he surprised her yesterday, since after so many times, he didn't improve at all, and that it's impressive the lack of talent he has. The young man replies that it's difficult since she moves a lot. The girl then says there's no other option, and that they will have to repeat it more times today. The young man refuses to do it and says they already practiced all night. Rikudu asks if he doesn't like the idea, at least he must do his job well, affirming that she won't let him sleep that night either. The blonde boy and his friend, upon hearing that, are surprised and affirm that surely they are doing it. Thus a week passes. The time comes when Rikudu is on top of Akita. The young man affirms that he is going to start, something that the girl tells him he can do whenever he wants. Then he starts with the technique, remembering the movements and how they have to do it to fit in a good triangle. Upon concluding, he thinks that now he has to push his knee to tighten even more. In the end, he manages it, since Rikudu asks him to release her. The student lets her go and affirms with joy that he finally managed to make her surrender. The girl replies that he did well and that, at least, now he will manage to make it work. Akita comments that he trained hard for a whole week. Then, Rikudu reveals that normally it takes a little less. Right away, she affirms that it's fine and that now it's time for the next step. Akita, upon hearing, asks for a break and says he is going out to buy something. After buying, he thinks that he feels a lot of pain. He affirms that it's good that Rikudu is teaching him, but that she doesn't take it lightly, and that if it continues like that, he will end up with a broken body. Then the watch he had starts vibrating. Akita wonders what is happening and why it activated out of nowhere. Right away, it vibrates even more, and he questions if it's broken, but then supposes something else. Looking to the other side, he sees that a man is approaching him. The young man reflects that for some reason he can feel that this person participates in the reality. When close, the man introduces himself as Isao Watanabe. He adds that a student shouldn't be participating in something like that since his parents must be worried. But then he affirms that it's not his problem and asks if they could go somewhere else now. Akita reflects that the bracelet only showed his position in the ranking, but now he understands that it's not just that. He believes that when a participant approaches another, the bracelet vibrates, and that's when participants meet to fight each other. That is what Mitsuhara calls a real street fight simulation. In another place, both the young man and Watanabe are sitting in a square. The man comments that today was a day with no positive points. His daughter ignored him as always. He was late to work taking a packed train. His boss yelled at him and the rookies laughed at him behind his back. He affirms that everyone thinks he is a robot without feelings and that even he gets angry and can also lose his mind, revealing his anger. He stands up, apologizes, and explains that he didn't come there to talk. He asks if they can start the fight. Akita stands up and, taking off his glasses, remembers the technique he learned and thinks that he wants to test it right away, getting into position to fight. Then a drone appears, revealing that it started broadcasting the fight that is about to begin. Mitsuhara comments that finally an interesting fight started. His secretary asks if it's worth giving an opinion about who will win, to which the man replies negatively. He asks her to think with him. Watanabe is a powerhouse when it comes to full-contact karate, and when he was 20 years old, he took second place in a world tournament. However, he seems to have abandoned the world of fighting, but his strength doesn't disappear from one day to another. In other words, he is the strongest against a common student. The secretary asks if then what he is saying is that Akita will be massacred, to which Mitsuhara affirms that will happen. But he remembers that this is a fight without rules, and that if it were an official fight, Akita would certainly lose. In the end, everything depends on how he reacts to violence. Something can change. The student looks at his opponent and thinks that he doesn't seem that strong, that he is just a man. He starts moving and now goes on the attack, beginning with a low kick. Mitsuhara, upon seeing that, shouts that it's not bad, and that Akita even pretended to walk to hide his intention to attack. But Akita quickly takes distance and ends up confused. He reflects if that man didn't defend himself and that he also didn't react. He managed to land the hit, but even so, it didn't work. Then it is explained that the conditioning of body parts changes. That in full-contact karate, one of the trademarks is the training to strengthen body parts, since fights are bare-handed. Participants train their bodies using impact posts and sandbags. Among all the training, fists and shins are the most important. Over time, those body parts become weapons capable of destroying the adversary, transforming both into armor and attack tools. That's why Watanabe's shins are practically armor, since he was ranked as the second best in the world of full-contact karate. The low kick doesn't work, just at the moment when Akita tries again, but without results. So the man starts walking towards the student, who keeps taking some distance until cornered. At that moment, Watanabe prepares an attack, striking right where Akita was. The young man falls to the ground since he managed to dodge and then looks at where Watanabe's attack landed. It reveals that due to being the second best in karate, his fists are undoubtedly a lethal weapon, since he managed to destroy part of the wall. The young man thinks that it's impossible. He considers that if he receives such an attack, it will be his end. Looking at his approaching opponent, he wonders what he should do now. He reflects that it doesn't matter, and that, since kicks don't work, what he has left is only the lightning punch. But unfortunately, Watanabe defends himself, leaving the student totally unprotected and receiving an attack. Akita, upon receiving the blow, wonders what is happening and cannot understand it. However, he pulls himself together and tells himself that he took the hit in the stomach and now needs to prepare to counterattack. But soon he feels the consequences of the strike. He complains of the pain as if his organs were being twisted. He then explains that it is impossible to say exactly which technique delivers the most lethal blow, but surely the most painful is the one to the torso. Because even if the victim remains conscious and without visible wounds, the pain is so intense that it may cause them to fall to their knees. At that moment, Watanabe begins to walk toward his rival, and Akita thinks that running is impossible. He cannot move and ends up falling to the ground. He reflects that this is bad, coughing up some of his own vital fluid. Already close to the student, the man prepares another attack, making Akita think that if he takes that blow, everything will be over. And that is exactly what happens. He does not receive just one impact, but multiple attacks one after another. The young man feels he is losing consciousness and remembers when Rikudu explained to him that if he was knocked down and started being hit on the ground, it would be an excellent opportunity to show the results of his training. So Akita puts into practice what he learned. First, he twists his body to dodge the strike, grabs his opponent's head with his left hand, pushes his arm with the right, and with his legs free, applies the lock. He thus manages to lock in a full triangle. After doing so, the young man wonders if he executed the technique correctly, affirming to himself that his body moved on its own because he had spent the entire week training it. There was no way it could go wrong. He concludes that he locked it in perfectly and that soon his rival will pass out. But Watanabe begins to explain out loud the methods to escape from that technique, leaving the student in trouble. Suddenly, the man manages to break it and escape flawlessly. Upon completing his successful escape, he states that theory should not be underestimated. He then explains that he practiced karate his whole life and that he is an amateur who knows absolutely nothing about ground fighting, but that when the fight was scheduled, he studied on a website, watching several videos of techniques. Upon hearing that, the young man wonders if his rival only watched videos, while he killed himself training all week, questioning whether it is a matter of talent or physical preparation. He remembers that neither the low kick, nor the fast strikes, nor the triangle worked against him. He mentally asks himself what he should do and recalls Rikudu's words, when she said that if all his techniques were neutralized, he would lose, since the only option would be to run away. This bothers him, but he also remembers that she told him that if there is no other way out, the best is to pray not to get too badly hurt. However, Rikudu assured him that she could teach him a certain strike, an all-or-nothing gamble, which most of the time can fail, and if that happens, he will end up gravely injured. She stated that to execute it requires a lot of training and insane courage. Watanabe at that moment says he will give him advice as his superior. He explains that the difference in strength and skill between them is obvious, and to be honest, there is no chance he can win. That is why he advises him to surrender now and go to a hospital, and asks why he keeps trying to fight. Akita, upon hearing this, replies that he doesn't know why either. That makes the man reflect on where he had seen that attitude before, because even in that situation, he too tried to win. Even in a desperate moment, he knew he would not give up. The stance of believing in his own potential enrages him like never before. He confesses to himself that those eyes are exactly like the ones he once had. He remembers 25 years ago when he was in the Kyokushin tournament. Just then, someone comments that it is reckless. But the 24-year-old Isao Watanabe replies that he has to fight. His master asks him not to be stupid and to show him his fists, revealing that they were injured. He concludes that in the semi-final, his fist was shattered and asks if he has any flashy move. Young Watanabe replies that not being able to use his right fist is quite a big disadvantage, something his master ironically questions whether he really believes so. He then states, without favoritism, that his skills are the best in that tournament, and that he can confirm that in 4 years he will win. That is why, according to his master, it is impossible for him to continue now. But the young man replies that he is 24 years old and that 4 years is too far away. He states that for someone his age, perhaps a year or 4 does not make much difference. Upon hearing him, his master asks him not to joke. Watanabe responds that losing does not scare him. What truly scares him is running away without at least trying, because if there is even a small chance of winning, he will keep fighting. Hearing this, his master comments that if he goes that far, he has nothing more to say and wishes him victory. Watanabe affirms that with conviction. However, that miracle did not happen. He remembers that the pain in his shattered fists was not something he could overcome with willpower, since he could barely block and much less strike. In the end, he performed so poorly that it would not be unfair to call it a humiliating defeat. With a single strike from his opponent, he was knocked out. The situation worsened because the impact damaged his head and he was forced to retire. He tells himself that if someone like him, who only dedicated himself to karate, lost that, he had nothing else to do. However, through a karate acquaintance, he got a job in a company that did not interest him, married a woman his boss introduced to him, and when the children came, he did not know how to deal with them, so he left it to his wife. From that day he decided to fight, he lost everything. He concludes that he should not have accepted a battle he could not win. Back in the present, he looks at Akita as a healthy young man, blinded by the glory of victory, who does not recognize the risks, and if he fails, only pain will remain, stating that he will teach him that. Akita, upon looking at him more closely, reflects that the second best Kyokushin fighter against a complete amateur have very different levels of experience, that the only path to victory is a decisive strike, and that is the only chance of triumph. Watanabe, for his part, thinks the same, considering that defeating an opponent with a single strike is the ideal of karate. But in reality, it is very difficult, since the human body is unpredictable. As long as he is careful with the techniques that could turn into a one-shot move, he will be fine. He begins to think of the techniques he can use to take down his opponent, remembering that he must be cautious with ground fighting, since last time he escaped because the technique was not complete. If he gets caught again, it could be dangerous. On the other hand, Mitsuhara mentions the technique and explains that Akita, who is a complete amateur, at least managed to do a triangle, and imagines that this was his plan from the beginning. Then his secretary comments that he already revealed that he knows how to do it, to which Mitsuhara replies that it is true, and that is why Watanabe is even more cautious. But that is when the flying triangle comes in. If it were a surprise attack, it could work. Regardless of whether Akita manages to do it or not, and taking into account Watanabe's skills, any strike can become fatal, stating that if it lands, it is a victory. If not, it is a defeat. Just then, Akita moves, exciting Mitsuhara even more. But before it all happens, Akita reflects that he has no other alternative. He must try it, confessing to himself that it is win or lose. He begins to walk toward Watanabe, who in turn thinks that his opponent's goal is to execute the flying triangle. However, he is alert to any other technique. Moreover, he knows that the flying triangle cannot be applied unless he is very close. So he plans to attack as soon as the boy approaches. That moment comes as Akita runs in his direction. Watanabe wonders if he is really willing to lose it all, affirming that this is what they call recklessness, and that after losing everything, he can regret all he wants. He throws a punch and declares that it is over. However, for Akita, that frontal rush was a risky bet, as he could easily receive a kick. He gambled on a simple assumption, praying that the defensive move Watanabe used would work in his favor. And it worked perfectly, closing the distance with the man. Watanabe immediately thought that the young man would use the flying triangle and threw a knee strike at him. But apparently, Akita managed to defend himself. However, the young man remains motionless, affirming that in that gamble, the winner was him. Because in the end, he simply bet on that. Whether punches or knees, the method did not matter. Right before Izao's eyes, he took a blow to the stomach and bent in half. A desperate gamble. Seeing that, Watanabe wonders what just happened, realizing that it is an all-or-nothing technique. More precisely, a spinning kick to the torso. A forward somersault, like a fall while launching the kick. Since the body ends up on the ground after the movement, it is known as a sacrifice technique, a technique recognized even in full-contact karate. After that, Watanabe reflects that he was struck. He cannot believe his rival used that in a fight, even though he himself was willing to take it. He remembers the day he lost and feels that it is the same now. That technique defeated him then. He considers that if he had remembered it that day earlier, he would not have taken that blow. He states that it was to the clavicle and notices that his left arm does not move, but in the end, he manages to avoid fainting. He considers it splendid, while at the same time preparing to deliver the final blow. He concludes that the all-or-nothing failed. However, that was the gamble Akita won, because by dodging the blow, he manages to lock in a perfect triangle. The man, upon realizing where he is, thinks of escaping, but immediately notices that he cannot lift his chest. He wonders if the young man had thought of that position from the beginning, and how he could have reached it. And finally, he faints. Thus it is announced that Watanabe lost consciousness and that the winner is Akita. While unconscious, Watanabe wonders where he is and why everything is so dark. He quickly remembers that he was fighting. Then he wakes up and, upon looking to the side, sees Akita. He quickly gets ready to strike, but the young man asks him to wait. After explaining everything, the man understands what happened. He reflects and realizes that he fully received the triangle technique, knowing that whoever takes it tends to misinterpret the situation upon waking, since their memory gets interrupted and they think the fight is still going on. He says he has nothing to say as the loser, but there is something he wants to tell him. Hearing that, Akita assumes he's going to complain. However, Watanabe says that during their previous fight, when he fell and took one of his blows, he surely noticed the difference in skill. He knew it wasn't a fight to the death and could have accepted defeat right then. Even so, he risked everything in an unfavorable bet, and if he had failed, he could have suffered an irreversible injury. He assures that in a way they are very similar. That's why he wants to give him a piece of advice, to stop fighting before losing everything. Akita looks somewhat confused, and just then someone approaches. It's Rikudo, who asks if he's an idiot. The young man quickly greets her, and she replies that she came to get him because it's already late. However, Watanabe asks what she just said. The girl repeats that he's an idiot. She explains that trying to get something without being willing to lose anything is impossible. Losing is natural, and what matters is what one does afterward. She insists that Watanabe is completely wrong. She reveals that Akita has already lost everything, as he was forced to kneel before someone he despised. A woman literally crushed his face, and his house was burned down. She declares that he is a miserable man who has lost his pride, dignity, and everything else. Hearing that, Watanabe asks what happened to the house. Akita replies that he doesn't want to bow his head again before what's irrational. That's why he wants to become strong. Rikudo adds that after losing everything, he stood back up. Then she asks Watanabe what he'll do now. She tells him there's nothing wrong with him, because he still has fists to strike and legs to kick. He hasn't lost anything and can still win. She concludes by saying that's what violence is about. After that encounter, both young people return home. The girl comments that overall what Watanabe said makes sense, since relying on a hip twist with a kick, betting on landing a perfect triangle, is a poor strategy from a martial arts standpoint. Akita responds by asking her not to teach him dangerous things, but she replies that if one can win with normal techniques, there's no need to rely on luck. That annoys Akita a little, until Rikudo calls out to him and clarifies that she's actually complimenting him. She says it was to be expected. Maybe he doesn't have talent for martial arts, but he does have talent for fighting. And anyway, she congratulates him on his first victory in the tournament. That's why she promises to give him a reward. The next day, at Watanabe's workplace, his boss yells at him, saying that complaints have come from another office and asking what's wrong with him. One of the younger workers comments that the boss is being scolded again and that he doesn't want to end up like him. The man explains that, as he mentioned in his email report, it was their mistake. But his furious boss punches the wall and yells that he never said that. He asks if Watanabe knows those clients are important, that if they say something, it's final, and that as an adult, he should anticipate and act. Then he asks what happened to him, why he's so injured, and if he's an idiot, saying that's why he's only managed to become a section chief. Suddenly, a loud bang is heard. Watanabe has just put an end to it all. Turning around, he says he's going back to work. His boss, still shaken, looks at the mark Watanabe left on the desk after hitting it. Even the younger workers who witnessed the scene are impressed, and a girl says the boss is actually kind of cool. Meanwhile, Watanabe thinks that sometimes the irrational can be solved with a little bit of violence. Already at his residence, Akita is in the bathtub, relaxing and reflecting that in his first no-rules fight, he managed to win. Then he remembers that Rikudo told him she would give him a reward, and he wonders what it could be. At that moment, someone enters the bathroom asking for permission. It was his roommate, who, wearing a swimsuit, asks him if he happened to forget it. The young man is impressed and mentally asks himself what kind of clothing that is, questioning if the reward would be what he is thinking. Then the girl asks him to stand up. But before he does, she pulls him inside the bathtub, asking him not to be embarrassed, while the young man begs her to wait a bit. Already seated, he wonders if he is dreaming. He states to himself that it can only be that, and that he is certainly dreaming. However, those thoughts break when Rikudo asks for permission while she washes his body. Laughing a little, she asks him to relax. Nevertheless, Akita can only ask himself what is happening and if this is how it feels to be touched by a girl. He repeats mentally that he must relax, but then questions what is happening and if she is running her hands all over his body. He feels her fingers sliding over his skin, the soft touch that tickles him, and as if it were not enough, he senses the warmth of her body. He thinks that he is about to lose his seal. He thanks it in silence for having accompanied him all those years. But Rikudo comments that he is already done. She gives him a small tap and states that there is no problem, that everything is in order, assuring that he does not seem to have any fracture or serious injury. Hearing that, he asks if she did all that just to check if he had no injuries, something the girl confirms, although she asks what he thought she was going to do. Then he mentions that she had talked about a reward, so he imagines something else. Rikudo laughs and asks if he's that anxious. She reveals that she prepared something with great affection, so he can finish his bath and wait for her. Akita states that he will do so, and his roommate comments that it would be a problem if he started bleeding, so she asks him not to get too excited. That leaves him confused, wondering what she prepared for him while she leaves. Already somewhere else, Mitsuharu laughs while watching a fight. He confesses that he is impressed, since young Akita managed to defeat the karateka. He asks his secretary if he is not brilliant, and the woman replies that he seems as happy as if he had won that fight. The man admits that it is true, but clarifies that this is not the point. He explains that if it had been a fight with rules, the student would have undoubtedly lost, but he ended up winning because it was a no-rules fight. All of that was possible precisely because there was not something that limits them. Immediately, he reveals that he always thought about that and asks himself what a fight really is, answering that it is a struggle without rules, and that is the true essence of combat, using only fists. He considers that there are many ways of thinking about it, but he preferred to focus on preparation, since once the place and moment of the confrontation are determined, one can even use weapons or prepare mentally. But he asks if something with so much planning can be called a fight. Therefore, he says it must be something spontaneous and accidental, being that the essence of everything. Only in that instant can a force different from common martial arts develop. However, he immediately questions how he could make that happen spontaneously. He reveals that he made all participants of his event use a device that notifies them when another contestant is nearby. In addition, he defined a duration of 3 months and explains that nobody can endure 24 hours a day for 3 months without lowering their guard. That is why he asks what we think will happen. He answers that while they live their daily lives, at some point they will run into another participant, and without time to prepare, the fight will begin. He calls this type of confrontation the Mitsuharu Hikari method. He mentions that this is why it is a perfect rule and that only a genius could have thought of something like that, making clear that he is that genius. His secretary replies that she is glad for him but still wants to give him a piece of advice. The man asks what it would be, and the woman explains that a long time ago Plato described the world of truth as the world of ideas, and said that this real physical world was an imperfect reflection of that one. That is why perfection does not exist in this world. The president, somewhat discouraged, asks if it was necessary to say something so depressing, and his secretary replies that it was only friendly advice. On the other hand, in a hotel, someone was tied up. It was one of the participants. In front of him, there was another, who comments that it seems some idiot invented those rules, since they are full of flaws. Before that situation, it is explained that martial arts serve as a path to become the strongest. They can be different from each other, but the goal of all is the same: to reach supreme strength. At that moment, an injured man asks to be left alone. His aggressor replies that that is curious and asks if he did not want to be the strongest. With a knife in his hand, he questions why they do not use weapons. Returning to Mitsuharu, he laughs and asks his secretary, Shiratori, to look at that, stating that an interesting fight has just begun. But the woman begins to leave, asking him not to bother her while she sleeps. She adds that she is not interested in those fights that interfere with her precious sleep. The president asks if she is sure, explaining that this time it is one of the best fights since, in the end, one of the participants is a high school student. He explains that she is a girl who practices jujitsu named Kureha Takayanagi, an elite fighter of whom they say she learned shoulder lock techniques even before she started talking. In addition, her videos hitting other students went viral, which turned her into a very popular influencer. It is evident that she is a powerhouse who has already won national tournaments, and he considers it incredible to have a gem like her in his event. He begins to question whether that high school girl can fight without rules, and if she could defeat a man. He concludes that that fight will be a real spectacle. Then, his secretary mentions that she knows she is famous and that she catches attention, but asks what kind of person her opponent is. The man replies that he is just anybody, clarifying that it seems he never trained martial arts. Shiratori understands, but points out that the guy has a criminal record. Already in the prelude to the fight, the girl comments that it seems they bumped into each other by accident, but proposes to introduce themselves. She states that she will start, saying that her name is Kureha Takayanagi, and that she practices jujitsu. Then she asks him to say his name. The man replies surprised, saying that he did not know that there were girls participating in the event. Takayanagi answers that that is right and asks if he thinks that a woman cannot defeat a man. Her opponent replies that he does not mean that, but the girl mentions that it is what most people think, although she believes that in reality, that is inspiring. She adds that she has practiced combat since she was a child. She prepares and confesses that they say jujitsu can make a person surpass the gender barrier. Then she begins to approach, and by making a slight movement, her opponent asks if she wants to shake his hand, extending it. The girl takes it, and with a quick movement focuses on the man's lower part, creating a favorable guard position as a starting point for attack and defense. With a spin, she manages to position herself behind him and apply a rear choke. The girl comments that this is the end, since once the technique locks in, it is impossible to escape. The man tries to say something and the girl asks him to speak louder. Then he stabs her in the arm. Feeling it, she immediately moves away. Her opponent comments that she ended up releasing him, but acknowledges that it was a good technique. He adds that she surely practiced for hours and that she is an excellent athlete. Kicking her, he asks what all of that was good for. He confesses that even someone extremely strong can yield to a simple knife, asking what is the point of strengthening oneself only with hands. He says he cannot understand it, and giving her another kick, asks if she still wants to fight. The girl, trembling in fear, apologizes and begs him not to come any closer. The man smiles and asks if she can see it, stating that that is what violence is about. Akita, getting dressed, reflects that they took him by surprise. Remembering seconds earlier, he thinks he has already received enough reward, but his roommate still prepared something else. He wonders what reward could surpass what he has received so far. Then he sees that what she wanted to give him was a knife, leaving him speechless. Rikudo comments that it is a gift and states that if he wants to survive in a no-rules event, the best thing is to use a knife. However, Akita replies that it is against the rules to use weapons, to which his roommate replies asking if he is sure such a rule exists. The young man insists that it goes against the laws of Japan. Rikudo assures that he is still naive. She reminds him that it is obvious that people will use everything at their disposal, since in the end, it is an anything goes. She asks if he does not think it is naive to believe that his opponents will play fair. He denies it, but the girl states that it is fine and that she will teach him the basics of how to use a knife. In addition, even if he does not intend to use it, it is best to be prepared in case a cutting weapon is used against him. Then she asks him to take it, something the young man considers very dangerous, but likewise, he takes the cutting weapon. Afterwards, Rikudo asks him to attack her with it, leaving him confused. She comments that she can endure it and asks him not to worry, to go without fear. She explains that first they will place the scene as if one of them had the knife. She asks him to imagine that this is his chance to take revenge, questioning if it is not an excellent opportunity. She asks him again to attack her. The young man freezes and begins to tremble. He reflects that although she tells him to attack her, he cannot because the knife is real. He knows that she has the confidence of someone who can defend herself, but wonders what would happen if she could not. He thinks about possible situations that could occur. Even so, he decides that he will attack her in a way that does not hurt her. However, when attacking her, Rikudo defends herself in a way that injures her companion, making him drop the knife and immediately scream that it hurts. He complains that she did not need to hit him for real, and asks what would happen if one of them got hurt with the knife. Rikudo, hearing that, asks if he is joking with her. The young man, scared, replies that he did not mean that. She questions if he is not taking the situation seriously. Rikudo bends down to pick up the knife and proposes that now they will switch roles. She points at him with the knife and asks what he will do if an enemy points at him that way. Akita, sweating, replies that he would probably run away. His roommate says that she understands, which leads the young man to question what she means by that. He then reflects better. The only escape routes are limited, and, to get out of there, he has no choice but to pass through her. If he tries to pass through her, he will be attacked. He understands that although it seems simple, fleeing can turn out difficult. He would not understand it unless a real knife were pointing at him. He considers that it is madness, but understands that this is how she makes him stronger. He states that it is fine. If he tries to run, he will be cut, but he knows he does not have what it takes to snatch the knife from her hands. That is why he will use another tactic. He claps in front of Rikudo. He reflects that this technique serves to make the opponent step back and remembers having seen it in a sumo broadcast. He will take advantage of that opening to escape. However, Rikudo grabs his hand and asks if he is stupid. At that moment, he remembers that the idea of fleeing from that woman was ridiculous, since unless he is willing to lose his life or pay the price, he has no way out. Just then, Rikudo stabs Akita's hand. The young man quickly falls to the ground and begins to scream in pain. His roommate explains that offering the hand like that to someone armed with a knife is the same as telling them they can hurt you, and asks if he believed that this would be only imaginary, clarifying that people do not think about being stabbed because, at that moment, violence does not exist in their world. She completes saying that she had expectations in him and that that is enough of that. Hearing her, Akita wonders if she is going to eliminate him. Akita, seeing her in that state, begged her to stop. He asked her to look at his hand, which was now injured, and also questioned whether she truly wanted to eliminate him. But Rikudo responded by asking what he was talking about, since he had informed her that they were going to train. and then inquired if they could continue. Akita, upon hearing that, reflected that convincing her would be impossible. He told himself that she had always been like that, and no matter how absurd it seemed, the weak could not challenge the strong. Therefore, there seemed to be no other alternative. At that moment, Akita stood up, raising his guard. He remembered when she said it wouldn't work to attack her without the intention to eliminate her. So he believed he had to go all out against her, otherwise he could not escape. However, he observed her carefully as she was now armed with a knife. He urged his mind to think about what to do, knowing he lacked the skill and experience to defend against it. Moreover, his hand hurt too much. Yet even so, he had few options left and would have to wait for a better opportunity to counterattack. Normally, one doesn't know what might happen, whether punches or kicks. If you knew what awaited you, the situation would be different, since you would only need to dodge the opponent's attack and maintain defense, even if the technique wasn't perfect. But with a knife, the scenario changed completely as the attack came from the blade. With that thought fixed in his mind, Akita prepared himself, convinced he could do it. At that moment, Rikudu attacked. Unfortunately, a knife had two advantages. The first was its offensive power. Just then, the girl struck another cut, since even the slightest touch could wound the opponent. That is, even without applying force to the blade, it could cause harm. However, for Akita, that meant nothing, and he assured that he was fine. When Rikudu lunged again, the young man prepared himself. But unfortunately, the second advantage of the knife was its presence. If one were struck by that weapon, they could lose their life, and its mere image or the fear it caused was enough to halt any counterattack attempt. That is why someone without proper training could not even move in front of a knife. And that was exactly what happened to Akita, causing him another wound. Immediately, the young man screamed in pain. That made Rikudu declare that he was pathetic, that in the end he got hurt for not moving, and if he had managed to dodge, she would have congratulated him. She mentioned that he was like a frog paralyzed in front of a snake with no choice but to become prey. That was his current situation, completely useless. But then the young man asked her not to be so arrogant, cursing her in the process. Hearing this, Rikudo looked at him and asked where he got that courage and if he had a plan. Or maybe he was more confident now because he also supposedly had a weapon. As he stood up, Akita replied that he didn't know, but he was fed up with the way she did things and exhausted by it all. He prepared to fight, declaring that now he would show what that frog could do. Thus, both were armed, and in front of Akita was a woman with a knife who had already stabbed and cut him 3 times. Even so, the young man wondered why such an abnormal situation calmed him instead of agitating him, revealing that, in reality, his thoughts had turned violent. Then Rikudu asked if he could move his right arm. Immediately, with a smile, he affirmed that if it was just a damaged muscle, it would heal soon, assuring that he would be fine. But Akita thought it was as expected, and that there was no choice but to continue. He knew she was overwhelmingly superior in combat, perhaps even a genius, but she was used to more than that. She was beyond imagination. After exchanging cold stares, Akita began to act. His plan was to throw his object as a projectile. He knew using his supposed only weapon in that way was an absurd strategy, and it would be great if it hit. But if she avoided it, he would just lose what he had to protect himself. However, if the goal was to force her to dodge, the situation was different. At that moment, after throwing the dumbbell at Rikudu's face without really expecting to hit her, he only wanted to gain time to do one thing: escape, since that was the most sensible choice. In the end, there was no need to try to defeat someone stronger, as resisting the impulse to resort to violence was the most rational solution. But Rikudo called him an idiot. Upon reaching the door, Akita realized it was locked. The young man thought that, of course, it was a normal lock and could be opened quickly, but by doing so, his roommate would have already reached him. He assumed that someone accustomed to fights would have anticipated this as expected. But before she could reach him, the young man activated his phone flashlight, blinding his pursuer for a moment. At that moment, Akita thought he had already considered that the door would be locked and that he needed a second to open it, so he had prepared the phone in advance. However, Rikudu did not move, and while Akita opened the door, she waited, determined to catch him as soon as she regained sight. But upon opening her eyes, she found her companion preparing an attack. He had unlocked the door to make her believe he was escaping, besides pretending that he could not move his right arm. Thus, he managed to land a precise blow on Rikudu's face, causing her to fall. At that moment, Akita's violence surpassed hers, making his fist kiss his companion's face. Akita has only one desire: to hit the girl who studies with him. Because of that, he was slaughtered many times, and he always ended up being beaten by her, even stabbed with a knife. Even so, he remained firm, and now he managed to hit Rikudo Setsuna. He reflects that he still hasn't won the fight, since he can't believe she would be reached so easily. And he is right, because as soon as she moves a little, the girl wakes up and swiftly positions herself while attacking. However, she notices that Akita is no longer there. She looks around the apartment a little and wonders if he ran away. She immediately starts laughing, overflowing with joy, saying to herself that he is a very interesting person. Meanwhile, Akita says that he has already gotten far enough away and thinks that she doesn't seem to have followed him. He recognizes that he has many things to analyze, but for now, he feels a lot of pain. He evaluates that he can move his hand and that the bleeding is decreasing. Also, he doesn't think the wound is serious, so he considers that avoiding the hospital is a good idea since they would question him about where he got injured. But before doing anything else, his watch starts ringing, indicating there is another participant nearby. A bit nervous, he starts looking for them, wondering where they are, cursing the situation. Just then, a boy appears, and they exchange looks. Akita asks him not to come any closer. The young man asks him to calm down, explaining that he is only looking for companions. He immediately says that there is no rule that forbids that, so forming an alliance and fighting together is much more advantageous. Obviously, if they reach the end, at some point they will have to fight each other, but until then, it's best to have good teammates. Akita acknowledges that the idea crossed his mind, but he knows that Rikudo would never allow something like that, so he gave up on it. He then asks the stranger why he is looking for allies, and the man responds that they both have the same goal. He believes that if he finds someone with his same vision, working as a team would be much easier. He also says that there are several flaws in the event that they could take advantage of, and he even thinks it might be possible to win without fighting. He adds that to survive, it is not necessary to know how to fight, but to have good survival skills. Akita reflects on that and admits to himself that by focusing so much on becoming stronger, he didn't take time to analyze the rules. The mysterious young man comments that there must be more people like them out there and asks why they don't introduce themselves first. He reveals that his name is Hibiki Hazama and that he is a part-time worker. Then he asks about Akita. The latter hesitates whether to trust him. He feels bad for judging him, but he seems suspicious. Even so, he recognizes that having an ally is a big advantage. At that moment, Hazama notices something and asks if Akita is injured. He starts approaching, saying there is a lot of blood and asking him to let him check since he has first aid knowledge. But Akita kicks him quickly, warning him that he had already told him not to come closer. However, after a few seconds, the student is stabbed. While Akita screams in pain, Hazama asks if he didn't hear what he said, reminding him that this is a game of eliminating or being eliminated. He then says it was cruel of Akita to hit him out of nowhere and asks if he practices any martial art, maybe kickboxing? He adds that Akita surely takes that fighting style very seriously. Akita complains, thinking that it can't be, and that this is the second time today. Something that shouldn't appear in a fight has appeared again. Hazama comments that when he takes that out, everyone makes the same face, as if he had broken some rule. He then asks why fighters insist on fighting barehanded, and why they seek to be the strongest. He says he understands that they can't carry a shinai all the time, and that carrying a firearm is too risky. But what he holds in his hand fits in a pocket and the risk is minimal. Also, as can be seen, the effect is huge. He questions whether there is any reason not to use it, saying that not using it is complete stupidity. That's why he thinks it's ridiculous for someone who doesn't use weapons to talk about being the strongest. In fights, he says, the one who can land a full swing with a metal bat is the strongest, and those who ignore ethics and rules always end up being so. In a story without romance or justice, using weapons is essential to be the strongest. Akita listens and wonders mentally what that guy is saying. He reflects that everyone easily crosses lines that no one would dare cross without feeling guilt. For them, it's something normal in that limbo. It is innocent violence not tied to others, that opponent being a human of the same type as Rikudo. He asks himself what he can do, say. He knows that the opponent has a knife and perhaps other weapons. He evaluates that he is unarmed and wounded, so he must plan coolly, as he would lose if he does something wrong. But even so, he sees one advantage. He notices that Hazama is not skilled in combat as he is too inattentive to his feet, and the low kick is working. If he manages to bring him into close combat, he could win. He tells himself that he will use the same tactic he used against Rikudo, which would be to dazzle him with the cell phone light to force him to drop the knife. But right then, his opponent asks why he is manipulating his cell phone and if he is trying to call a partner. He wants to know if he is trying to counterattack, surprised by it. He adds that it is the first time he sees someone stabbed who doesn't surrender or try to run. He explains that everyone cried and apologized with just one stab, and that some, when seeing the knife, ran away. Akita recognizes that this is true and wonders what he is doing. He states that the opponent has a knife and asks himself if it wouldn't be normal to run immediately. He then asks himself if that would be possible. He wants to know what would have happened if he hadn't run away at that moment. Supposing that maybe he could have hit Rikudu more. So it is explained that violence can captivate people, and once one commits that act, one learns the pleasure of using fists, because in any situation, violence emerges as an option. And for Akita, it is the option he chose in that instant. Hazama asks how long he will remain sitting and says that it's best to give up now. But the student throws his cell phone, which his opponent quickly dodges. The attack continues. Akita stands up and delivers a low kick. Hazama foresaw it, he dodges it and positions himself to fight. He immediately comments that it was dangerous and says he doesn't want to experience that again. He asks Akita if that pathetic strategy was his way of trying to change the situation, and now that it failed, he will surely want to run away. Akita thinks that it's a shame, but now he regrets having run away at that moment. He answers that he will give everything until the end. Hazama replies that he is an idiot, since he should have escaped.
Before the fight begins, Hazama remembers that he used a knife for the first time when he was 14 years old, and that back then he only wanted to escape the bullying. He remembers that the moment he pulled out the weapon, the hand that was hitting him stopped, and the idiot who had been acting brave ended up crying and apologizing after being stabbed. That was when he discovered that in front of a knife, everyone was equally powerless. But now he wonders why that does not work on him. They both size each other up, and Akita reflects that he is not being self-destructive, as he remains surprisingly calm at that moment. He wonders if he has become numb after facing stronger and armed opponents in such a short span of time. Either way, he knows that what he must do is already decided, as he carefully observes his opponent. Hazama, for his part, reflects that this guy shows no fear at all. He questions the reason for it and thinks that if he gets stabbed, he could die. He remembers that his previous opponents were the same, and that no expert should be free from fear, because there is no way to face this without the certainty of getting hurt. He believes that, if that is the case, he will surely choose a kick to the calf again. After all, a low kick has great range and is easy to use safely. Besides, he managed to land it earlier, even if it was not deep. To make matters worse, that kick was very powerful, and if he takes another similar hit, he may not be able to stay on his feet. He analyzes his situation and considers that he understands it well now, and that he can deal with it. He steps back and adopts a tighter stance to prevent the kick. That is the correct defensive response against that technique. However, he was mistaken, because at that very moment Akita moves, revealing that it is not that he feels no fear, but that he chose violence, and that he only needs to be honest about that feeling. He charges forward, forcing the young man to position the knife. Akita knows that the principle of martial arts is to harm the opponent without injuring oneself, but this charge completely ignores that idea. The reach and strength of his enemy's attack are superior, and this was clearly a self-destructive act. However, unlike those who tried to stay safe by doing nothing, Akita, in an instant, raised his fist against fear.
Hazama takes a solid hit and reflects that the situation does not look good, but now it is his turn.
Determined, he attempts to counterattack with a dangerous move, but Akita dodges the strike.
He immediately closes in and locks in a triangle.
Hazama, realizing that it is a triangle choke, wonders if his opponent had been aiming for this all along and thinks that he is an idiot since his hands are still free. They begin to struggle, dangerously bringing the knife closer to Akita's face. However, the young man manages to immobilize him. And Hazama thinks that this guy has the eyes of someone who is willing to be stabbed rather than give up, which ultimately happens. After an intense fight, Hazama falls unconscious, revealing that Akita's power is now superior and confirming him as the winner of that fight. Number C39-40-corrected. Akita, breathing heavily, begins to move and pushes Hazama's body aside in order to stand up. But then the worst happens. His watch begins to vibrate, revealing that someone is approaching. This makes the young man uneasy, wondering how much bad luck he must have for someone to show up right now. At that moment, a man comments that they have found him and reveals that they are a group of 3 people. The young man holding a baseball bat asks if Hazama was defeated, and his companion says that this is a problem.
The girl, for her part, comments that it happened because he took a break, irritating the guy with the bat.
He then asks if he will get the money if he hits that kid, and his companion replies that he will, since it is his right. Hearing this, Akita becomes furious and reflects that these people belong to Hazama's group. At the same time, the guy with the bat declares that now they will have to beat him up, and that clearly he has very bad luck. However, the student keeps thinking, remembering that Hazama had said he was looking for his companions, so he was not lying. He realizes that they are 3 enemies and that they are also using some kind of weapon, meaning he has no chance of winning.
Thus, he concludes that he can only escape if an opportunity arises.
But before he can do anything, the young man with the bat strikes him. Akita falls to the ground while his attacker celebrates the damage dealt. The student tries to get up, but is kicked again. After that, the aggressor asks if winning is really that easy and comments that he will be annoyed if Hazama does not pay him, considering how simple this is.
The guy with the bat asks them to hit him a bit more first, to feel better. Everyone agrees.
Akita, helpless, reflects that the situation is critical as he is losing consciousness. But then, Rikudu appears, startling Akita when he sees her. This piques the curiosity of the others, who turn their gaze toward her.
The girl comments that she finally found him. This makes Akita even more frightened. He wonders how she managed to find him and thinks that he has to run away immediately.
However, one of his attackers grabs him and asks where he thinks he is going, stating that he will not let him escape. Seeing the scene, Rikudu understands what is happening. She states that 3 against 1 and armed on top of that is very reasonable. She adds that if they say anything goes, then it really should mean anything goes.
One of the guys, somewhat hesitant, asks her what her problem is and whether she understands the situation.
But she, in a quick movement, slams her fist into the face of the one holding the bat. Immediately, she takes the bat and begins smashing it against his head over and over.
Seeing her companion being attacked, the girl rushes at Rikudo with a knife in hand, shouting at her to back off.
The other young man, watching the scene, curses the situation and asks who she is, also questioning whether she is crazy. Hearing them, Rikudo asks if this was not supposed to be a fight without rules.
She questions whether he thought only he was protected by rules and ethics, and adds that if that is the case, he must be an idiot.
The young man, hearing this, asks if she is mocking him.
Meanwhile, Akita watches the situation and wonders if she is really going to help him, even after having attacked him before.
Rikudo calls out to Akita and comments that he is badly hurt, that it looks like he has been beaten up. She adds that he has the courage to face a knife, but if he keeps going like this, he will lose his life before he realizes it. Because of that, the lesson will continue, and now she will teach him how to fight against weapons. She explains that the first step is to take the simplest measure, using a weapon as well in order to be on equal footing. However, Rikudo throws the bat to the ground, declaring that it is more pleasant to fight with bare hands. She rejects the weapon and immediately orders them to come at her whenever they want. Then she changes her mind and asks them to pay attention because she is about to begin the lesson on how to deal with knives. The thugs, hearing her, wonder if she is crazy. Akita thinks the same, not understanding what she intends to do, wondering if she is really going to face 2 people armed with knives, a situation that is difficult even for her.
Even so, the girl states that she will repeat this as many times as necessary, and that her first recommendation is to run away.
She explains that running is simple, and that even if the opponent is carrying a knife, they may have difficulty catching someone while holding that object. However, in this situation, running is not an option.
Akita reflects as she is truly treating this like a class. Then Rikudo states that when facing someone with a knife, the first thing to do is remain calm.
At that moment, one of the female thugs shouts at her to shut up and lunges forward. Rikudo continues her explanation and adds that something one must not do is fight directly against a knife. Deflecting attacks is highly discouraged. Moreover, the strength of a knife lies in its offensive power, and a quick slash can cause severe damage. Because of that, not even a professional fighter can evade endless jabs. She clarifies that if one is forced to fight, the knife must be avoided, as it will be the greatest concern. But if one remains purely defensive the entire time, it may lead to a mistake. That is why dodging everything in time is not the solution. As Rikudo speaks, her opponent takes a breath, having grown tired of attacking.
She then adds that disarming is also not a good option. Akita questions this, and his friend explains that she means taking the weapon from the opponent.
She then grabs the girl with the knife and asks her to attack with everything she has. This enrages her. She shouts for her to let go as she attacks, but Rikudo was already prepared. With quick movements, she takes the knife away. After doing so, she explains that this would not normally work. She asks him to remember the previous analogy, as that action would be like catching a jab, something unrealistic. The disarmed girl shouts for her to give the weapon back. Rikudo does so, stabbing the knife into her shoulder. The other girl screams in pain and retreats. Rikudo then asks, if running, dodging, and disarming are not correct options, then what is? She immediately answers, one must not face the knife, but the opponent. She reminds him that earlier he went all out and that taking the initiative was correct. But she explains that a direct strike can be intercepted, and even if it lands, it can invite a counterattack. At that moment, the thug shouts that she is crazy and charges forward. Rikudo continues explaining that what is needed is an attack that does not leave one within the opponent's reach, something that ends it all in a single move without giving a chance to respond. And then she delivers to her attacker a crescent moon kick. After the strike, she explains that with this movement, one can strike directly at the liver. That is her special technique for dealing with knives. Seeing such a display of power, Akita can only think of one thing, that his friend, Setsuna Rikudo, is incredible. He admits that it is not just about strength, that bright smile and her boundless cruelty will radically change his life, and that he alone is honored to witness it. She extends her hand, and when Akita takes it, Rikudo congratulates her dear apprentice. Meanwhile, Hazama flees, wondering who that girl was. He reflects that when he regained consciousness, she had wiped out his entire group. He tells himself that he managed to escape, but hopes never to see her again. Then someone behind Hazama comments that there is a woman completely drunk, sleeping nearby. He adds that Japan is a very peaceful country. Seeing the man, the young man's watch vibrates, and he wonders if this is another participant. He pulls out his knife and points it at him, ordering him not to come closer. The man asks what he is doing while slowly walking toward him. Hazama shouts that he told him not to come closer, and the stranger apologizes, saying he could not hear him. Even so, the boy attacks with the knife, but fails to reach him as the man kicks him away. He then comments that this country is far too peaceful, finally revealing his identity. He is Reiji Rain, the third-ranked fighter of the No Rules event. Double quote. Akita, already in his room, reflects that he can't believe he made it out of all that alive. He remembers that just a few weeks ago, he had never been in a fight, and wonders how things ended up reaching this point. He lies down and admits that his body is covered in bruises and cuts, and that only now is he starting to feel the pain. He knows that even if he wants to sleep right away, he can't. He figures it must be the adrenaline, since after everything that happened, falling asleep is simply impossible. He curses the situation, until someone knocks on his door. It's Rikudo, who asks if he can't sleep. The boy answers that he can't, and even less so now, since she has completely woken him up. However, his companion says that it's normal, and that it's hard to sleep after your heart races from a good fight. She adds that if he doesn't sleep, his body won't recover, and that they need to find a way to relieve that stress. Saying this, she declares that she's going to stay and hug him. This leaves the boy confused, but a few seconds later, the two of them are already in bed. It's revealed that studies show that hugs trigger the release of hormones such as oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, also known as happiness hormones, which have the effect of relieving stress. At that moment, Akita thinks that it's not so bad, and that he can't believe she's able to sleep like this, right next to the person who stabbed her just a few hours ago. Even so, he admits that he could get used to this, reaffirming that Rikudo is amazing. But that's nothing new. Meanwhile, in the event's promotional broadcast, Hikurobara Mitsuru declares that 100 ruthless fighters are taking part in the No Rules tournament, questioning who will emerge victorious. He goes on to explain that some of the favorites, such as an MMA fighter and a judoka, were completely annihilated. Even so, a simple boy, against all odds, is shocking everyone. He introduces him as Akita Masamichi, an ordinary student with no experience in martial arts. He claims that, according to the statistics, Akita could be a light in the darkness, and admits that he only invited him as a comic relief participant. However, he managed to knock out a karate expert and another fighter who used a knife. As a result, against all odds, he climbed to position 41 with 2 consecutive victories. Now, the No Rules tournament will keep its eyes and spotlights firmly on him. Back at school, Rikudo watches that promotion and comments that they're talking about him.
She asks if he doesn't want to watch it, and the boy replies that he doesn't since he always ends up getting hit. That's when they enter the classroom and a group of students greets Akita, explaining that they saw him on the No Rules program. His classmates say it's incredible and that everyone is talking about him. A girl hugs him, declaring that he doesn't just have brains, but muscles too, praising his arms. Ikushima, seeing all the attention, comments that now the nerd is stealing all the spotlight and says that if he had at least been invited too, he'd be famous. That's when his girlfriend tells him to stop being jealous. On the other hand, a girl asks Akita if he wants to go out with her after school. Before he can answer, Rikudo replies that he can't, because Akita's training is the priority. In response, the girl who was hugging him says she shouldn't be so stingy. She claims it's just a holiday, and that relaxing is important too. However, Rikudo refuses again and forbids it. In an office building, the secretary comments that 10 days have already passed since the event began, and that the fights continue while the rankings constantly change. Her boss replies that this is perfect. She says the broadcast is doing well, and that the audience has reached 180% of expectations, meaning the No Rules tournament is a success, just as predicted. However, there's something that worries her. She explains that Reiji Rain is in third place, and that he's far too violent. Her boss asks where she got that idea, and she answers that he's excessively brutal, citing the fight from the previous day as an example. The opponent could barely stay on his feet, yet refused to blink even for a second. Even so, Reiji completely destroyed him, breaking every bone in his limbs. She confesses that the estimated rehabilitation time is 12 months, and that even then he might never fully recover, facing difficulties for the rest of his life. Moreover, it's the first time someone has been injured that badly on the program, and not even those who were stabbed ended up like that. She admits that Reiji Rain's existence threatens the continuity of the show, and believes they need to take countermeasures. That's when her boss replies that such an attitude is boring. Yemi explains that any publicity is good publicity, no matter what. That's why he always says that if you want attention, you need something controversial. Otherwise, no one will care. He tells her to pay attention, explaining that entertainment is about tangible results, and that if you can make hundreds of people cry or laugh, those same people will dance in the palm of your hand. That's why what he does isn't about angering people, but about making them feel something alive. That way, they'll come back to watch the next episode. And that's why he invited Reiji Rain, because he's a scarred veteran mercenary. No other participant has eliminated as many people as he has. And that walking war criminal hasn't even started warming up yet. In a memory, a man watches his comrades lose their lives. At that moment, he reflects that this shouldn't be happening. He reasons that they're in a place with no strategic value, that his allies are already down, and that he doesn't know how many enemies remain. There are no reinforcements. He wonders if he's going to die there. He admits to himself that he never should have become a mercenary and that he can't end like this. At that moment, he stands up to fire, shouting that he doesn't want to die. Back in the present, that same man is drinking coffee and tells his companion that the place is very peaceful, too peaceful even. At that moment, the girl spots someone and notices that her friend's bracelet begins to vibrate, warning him. He comments that he ended up getting distracted. Then the girl says she thinks the guy outside is his opponent, and that he's walking around looking for him. The man says that she's very observant, and tells her she can eat without rushing, calling her Camilla. After that, his opponent comments that he finally came to him, and that he can tell he's prepared. Reiji Rain says yes, and that he can come whenever he wants. His opponent laughs and says that he seems experienced in fights, adding that he'll start now as he launches an attack. The blow lands directly on Reiji, and his rival says he already warned him, asking if he thought he'd give him any kind of advantage. Reiji admits it wasn't a bad punch and that he almost couldn't see it. He asks if he's a boxer, which the other confirms. He adds that he's an active professional, that he's 33 years old, and that he holds 5th place in the Japanese rankings. He says he doesn't think he'll ever become a champion, since he doesn't fit well in the ring. That's why he thought that if he took to the streets, he could perform better, launching another attack and landing a combo of blows on Reiji. As he takes the hit, Reiji says he understands now. He states that his opponent remains calm, which makes his attacks agile, fast, and precise, admitting that they're practically perfect. However, he's still too peaceful. He counterattacks and lands a blow, saying that punches are perfect for scoring points in boxing, but nothing more than that. He adds that he doesn't feel any killing intent from him, and that if he were really trying to kill him, he wouldn't be so calm. That's why a blow without the intention to take his life is far from frightening, no matter how fast or precise it is. And that's why a new version of himself would beat him down like this. After the fight, Reiji returns to where Camilla is and declares that it was nothing special. His friend replies that she wants more, something her caretaker understands. At that moment, he remembers that that day he broke. Facing death head-on caused his brain to receive extreme electrical signals, with emotions that exceeded what he could endure. In that instant, his heart stopped. Since then, nothing interested him, and everything became boring. Back in the present, the girl thanks him for the meal and then asks what he'll do today. The man replies that he's going to look for someone capable of killing him. Thus, it's revealed that he continues searching for another moment where the fear of death and the desire to live intertwine, since only something like that could make his heart beat again. Outside, he says that he doesn't want to die, and Camilla replies that, as always, she can't understand him.